From too tall to too two. This is the outside gate with Steve Hall on the L4 Media platform. And for show 84, Dave Osterman, how are you?
I'm good.
That's it. We've already been chatting for a little while, and Dave's a bit frustrated with the technology of getting onto this show. We had some glitches, but it's all good now. So, what hasn't been good though, Dave? You've had a few health problems recently. So, do you want to give us a
Well,
little bit of an update on that?
yeah, I'm good. Uh, at the end of December 24, just life and career in the trenches. 7 years ago, I wore out my right hip. I suffered on Tutu Motorsports for the last couple years on the team. I was bone to bone. So when the team ended in 15, and I think it was in 16 or 17, I got my hip replaced. And I've always worked out, exercised, and I've always, you know, like Mitch says, I'm going to hire you because you always seem like you're doing the work of three people, and I like that. But and I guess that then wore out my right shoulder that I've had issues with. I wasn't dislocating it, but in December, just issue, I had a full torn rotator cuff, four major things. Anyway, uh, and I'm also a pussy with medical stuff like this. It's funny. My late father was an orthopedic surgeon, but you think I'd welcome needles, but I really don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had to get that done right. And since I wasn't a Jet Lawrence kind of guy or a Chad Reed, my healing time was basically 6 months, and then with no real resistance training. Well, then as we were rolling in towards May, and I was smiling like a kid in a candy store, April 1st, my prostate started acting up, which a lot of men have issues with. But in my family, the men, it could lead to prostate cancer. And my wife and I have been on the horse monitoring that for years. I get 3 PSAs a year, an annual MRI. My dad had it and beat it. My younger brother had the cancer, and they removed his insides like a female's hysterectomy, so to speak. And with me, it just I had an issue 3 years ago. It reared its ugly head. My doctor and I, urologist rather, we knew this was coming, and then it reared its ugly head on April 1st, April Fool's Day. And so that basically, I was operated on the end of the month in April. Then that added 2 months onto my recovery of everything. Uh, and my urologist didn't clear me to exercise or anything. And at that point, I'm not a big bodybuilder guy, but I do train a lot. I do work out a lot. I'm an avid cyclist. I got a full cable machine in my bedroom. And Yeah, I think I'm pretty good for my age. And but dude, I what is that? 6, 7 months. If you've ever been in a cast, the shoulder brace was on for 6 weeks. Then thank God that was off. But then between that and the prostate, I had to forego my 2 days a week shoulder therapy. And so now I'm as I talk to you now, when I hang up later, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I do my little training regime here at the house. And then July 1st, I'm allowed to get back on a bicycle and a dirt bike. So, yeah, so I'm excited, and I feel stronger already. Um, and I lost some weight during the process, uh, mostly muscle, and but I'm starting to get it back. So yeah, I'm anxious to get back to myself, and like I said, I feel I dodged a bullet. Um, and they're going to recheck me. We're supposed to recheck me in July for my prostate stuff, but due to everything I've been through, the urologist, who's a female, which is a trip anyway, because you're talking about your privates to a
Yeah.
room full of women. But
Yep.
it's a serious thing. So,
Yeah.
but I just talk to her like I'm talking to you or my wife. So
Yeah.
she kind of laughs sometimes, some of the things I compare it to or how I say things, but I try to keep it light because it was an extreme deal. I didn't dig what was going on. And my advice to any guy over 50, uh, you know, whether it runs in your family or not, you got to stay after your checkups. That's
Yeah.
otherwise, whatever it is inside you, you could feel great, but there could be something lurking that'll bite you in the ass. And yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I certainly do, Dave. My dad, he beat prostate cancer probably 10 years ago now. So
Oh, so it runs in your family.
it does, man. Yeah, and since then I get the checkups once a year. So
Let me ask you, how old are you?
I'm 49. So,
Oh, yeah,
but
next
yeah,
year you got to step it up. You know,
yeah,
I don't know how the doctors are in Australia, but like I said, I get 3 PSAs a year, and then I get an annual MRI where they kind of look at you like a loaf of bread, you know, all
oh
the
yeah, yeah,
slices. And yeah, the late Dave Feeney, he had that,
yeah,
and he didn't do because I talked to his wife Carol. We're very friendly, and I was very
yeah.
friendly with Dave. Uh, yeah, I heard the story. You know, he went home to Australia to be with his family and whatever. Carol stayed here in the States, and he called her one day prior to coming home and says, "Hey, dear, you got to make me an appointment with a doctor or urologist. I'm pissing blood." And then it escalated from there.
Mm,
Um, you know, he just waited too damn long, which a lot of people do. It's like, yeah, that's unfortunate yeah, that killed me when I heard that.
mm.
Yeah, if it gets me, it gets me. But hopefully, if it's coming, I'll know it's coming and it's treatable. You know, if you let it,
Yeah,
just like a leak in your house or under your sink or the worn brakes on your car, you gotta really stay on top of it at a certain point. You know.
absolutely. That's good advice, Dave. Yeah, if yeah, any bloke, yeah, especially they say over 50. I was probably started getting checked at sort of 45, I suppose, especially after my dad, and it's definitely worth staying on top of. I know it's I'm pretty sure in Australia it's the leading cause of cancer death for men. In fact, I think it's one of the leading causes of death for men here. So
You know, it's interesting. I went to a wake for a buddy of mine, old rider pal of mine, uh, just passed away, and when I was there, because I posted a few things on Facebook, and a lot of
mm,
people were coming up to my wife saying, "Hey, is Dave okay? Is Dave okay?" You know, which is cool. And even some people came to me. I don't even know if people, you know, a couple buddies, like my one buddy came up to me. I haven't seen him in a while, and I go, "Dude, did you not read my post? I never said I had cancer. I said I just, you know, it's like sometimes people don't read everything, and I'm probably guilty of that a lot of times too. But needless to say, it was a bunch of blue haired guys like myself and women there. Like I'm 68 and I feel like I'm 35. Uh, and so, yeah, I mean, you know, our generation, when my dad, excuse me, when my dad passed away some years ago, he's in my garage and he's looking at my mountain bike and this and that. Different generation. He goes, "Wow, that's a nice looking bike." When I told him how much it cost, because he asked, you know, he crapped his pants. He couldn't believe it, you know, because it in his generation, as you rolled into your late 60s, early 70s, you know, maybe golf and tennis.
mm,
If you still snow skied, so be it. If you did anything at all,
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, and everybody ages differently, men and women, but it's what's inside that I think counts. So, like I said, I got 4 grandkids, you know, um, and yeah, so I'm excited about all that. Um, and we'll
how
give it
many kids,
hell till
Dave?
the
How
end.
many
Excuse.
kids? How many kids do you have?
I have a son. He's 36. He's a
Yeah,
designer at Fast House
yeah,
and lead designer there. And my daughter, 33 maybe or two. She's a school teacher,
yeah,
and she has 2 little boys. Uh, Hayden is 2. The littler one I think is 11 months, and my son, he's got a 5-year-old. He just turned 5, June 5th. Daxton, and a little girl, Henley. She's 3.
yeah.
Um, and Yeah. So, and what's a trip is my son and daughter live pretty much within cycling or walking distance from us. So
Yeah.
they're like always here. Their dogs are here. Something's here. So we're like the depot for everything. But I wouldn't change it for nothing. I mean, I traveled like a spaz for most of my life. My philosophy was always, for example, if I got hired at Star Yamaha to be the manager, is a hypothetical, because when 2-2 ended, I did talk to some teams. I talked to Dunlop years earlier. I talked to the AMA years earlier. Prior to 2-2, things came up in my life, and they wanted me to move there. In other words, I would never move there for the job,
Yeah.
because the jobs only last a year, 2 or 3, as I've seen, and that might be just due to me. But at the end of the day, I never wanted to uproot my family, because then shit, I don't want to be living in Ohio for nothing. I mean, when I
Yeah.
did the Harley Davidson thing, which we'll touch on at some point, that was in 07. I roomed with my lead mechanic at his house. I rented a room in his house. I bought a bed for the bedroom. He was divorced, and we hung out all the time because we worked together. And Harley flew me home every 2 weeks throughout the year, the project till it was killed. And yeah, but I was never gonna fricking move to Wisconsin. My move to Wisconsin was on a temporary basis, the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
It's not like they signed me for a 10-year deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Good stuff. All right, Dave. We might just spend a little bit of time on just to get your thoughts. We'll spend 10 minutes or so on just the current motocross season.
well,
Yeah, tell us your thoughts.
Well, it's interesting seeing so many generations. I'm a huge Tomac fan. The Lawrences. I mean, how could you not be a fan? There's a lot of things I like and I don't like. For example, Supercross. We'll start there. I've had a lot of success in Supercross. I usually have 3 opinions for things. I have the Davo opinion. I have the general race team guy opinion. Then I have what I call upper management opinion, like the Triple Crowns. I like the Triple Crowns when I'm on the couch watching.
Yep.
I wouldn't like it if I was on a race team.
Yeah.
I think it raises the budget, because now every rider has to have 2 bikes. Now every privateer has a different curveball thrown at them. In other words, they always said they were for the privateers, but the Triple Crown really goes against the privateer, because when you go into the pits in photographs or whatever, obviously you're down in Oz, but the modern guy like a Lawrence and his brother, you go onto the truck and there's 10 bikes sitting there.
Yeah.
When you go to a 3-digit guy or an upstart 2-digit guy, newly acquired 2 digits from 3 digits, budget wise or sponsor wise, they may have one good bike.
Yeah.
In other words, it's very expensive. Though I like the racing, I don't like sideshows in a series. In other words, they don't put speed bumps in the Indy 500, right?
Yeah.
They don't let alligators run on the golf course when the players are actively being there, unless it's accidental. You know what I'm saying? It's not like adding a mud hole in a Supercross like they did back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
The Triple Crown to me is like a Joker lane, and the Triple Crown to me is really it's almost a series within a series.
Yeah.
And I think at least for me, being a purist, it kind of taints the sport. I know the Ricky Carmichaels and all other RV, in other words, the Weigants and all of them, they're paid to say it's great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So though I value their opinion on some things, I've been down there arranging pit passes and stuff in my day, and I've heard the people behind the mic talking to the people with the mics. It's almost, in a sense, it's almost like fake news. They're just kind of telling them the narrative, where to go, where not to go, and plus I even know some people that have had that role, in some capacity. And they've told me that,
Yeah.
even if I didn't see it or hear it with my own eyes. So I do, when I was at Pro Circuit and we went from 2-stroke to 4-stroke in its infancy, just due to my years, when the senior guy at Kawasaki and I were sitting in hospitality one day, we got on the subject of it. And I told him right then, years prior, not like Noah predicting the floods, but I said, I think this is going to drive more families away than it's going to bring into it. It's raising the cost tenfold. In fact, I've been approached by some big money bag people that wanted to make a team years ago, as they wander through the pits at some locale.
Yeah.
And I'd be introduced to this guy or a couple guys, or I'd get a call on the phone, and I would always steer them towards 450 programs first, because I said that's the more economical way to go. The riders may be more money for a name guy, but the equipment is cheaper.
Yeah.
The 250 class is the most expensive class to be in. The salaries are a little less.
Yeah.
But the equipment, you need way more of everything. And if you want to be, I was, look, when 2-2 ended, I was flattered to get some calls, because it's better than not getting any calls, right?
Yeah.
But I got a couple calls, and this one guy, he's probably been out there spending millions of dollars for several years. And now all of a sudden he wanted to get serious. But I'm just like, that just doesn't appeal to me. First of all, it's like 3 steps back from where I was. I'm not going to fly all around. I think I've earned the right. I'm not going to fly all around the country, given my experience, to be on a program that there's no top 5s possible.
Yeah.
That's, I would have done that in my younger years.
Yeah.
In fact, I did that, but so to speak, and no disrespect for them, any phone call is a welcome situation, and there's only so many seats at the table, let's face it. But yeah, so in Supercross, I think, obviously it's entertainment, but you got safety. Look at the attrition rate. You got people in Supercross, I'm not going to name names, on the inside. They were never racers themselves. They were a sales and marketing guy or this or that or the other thing. And I'm not saying they're not nice people, but they're making decisions on things like the whoops.
Yeah.
I mean, the freaking whoops.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from many generations where the whoops define Supercross.
They do.
Really.
They do, don't they? Really? Yeah.
No, the jumps and the whoops define Supercross. And then they decided to throw the dart at the wall, saying, "Oh, we're going to try this." And again, I'm all for trying stuff.
Yeah.
But I think some of the best years in modern Supercross were when they had some of the riders. They had a Wyndham track, they had a Stewart track, they had an RC track. Guys that had property and invested in themselves. That all went away. They took the control away.
Yeah.
So that kind of bothers me. They got rid of the dragon backs. I mean, the guys are in the air now more at certain venues than they're on the frickin' ground. And and then they wonder why the big name guys are on the couch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're trying to sign up Walmart and United Airlines or the U.S. Army, they want the Mike Tysons on the starting line.
That's right.
To be there in the beginning, and they want them to be there at the end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I guarantee you, if the NFL was losing running backs and quarterbacks and all this stuff week in and week out, they would change it up.
Yeah.
They would change it up. So that bothers me. And then in the outdoors, even when I was in the outdoors, still doing it, a lot of the modern promoters do a great job. But a lot of the promoters, nowadays, probably even in Australia, fuel costs are high,
Yeah.
manpower is high, everything's elevated. So now a lot of the tracks, wood chips and the whole demographic of the track is completely what the track used to be. And even our famous Southwick isn't what it used to be, just due to years. Let's face it, I'm getting some wrinkles I never had before. So that a track will be somewhat the same over age, the weather and whatever goes on. So I get all that. They got to refurbish whatever they got to do. But some of the tracks, I was reading a thing with Mount Morris this weekend, and just the ruts and everything. It's like it some of the tracks, their prep is it's too man-made. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's too man-made, and I think that leads to what I call too much frosting on the cake. I think Colorado this year, a couple of weeks ago, was a prime example of that. I think Mount Morris developed into that. Again, they can't predict Mother Nature, but some things are just some things. You know what I mean? Like when you go to Seattle Supercross that time of the year with no roof, it's going to be a freaking disaster. I've never understood that, but I understand. Since its inception, we're second fiddle to the ball and bat sport. So some of the venues don't want us inside.
That's
and
right,
what's funny about Seattle, the Kingdome had a roof. They tore it down, built another stadium next to it. You know what I mean? So it's just it's a kind of love-hate relationship with what goes on, even with the scheduling and all that. That seems to be always a given in our sport, that we're not even to the level of NASCAR. So I think, and I've always said, even though I've had a career in it and I've made a living in it and I've been what I call successful in it, I've always had the opinion, if my daughter came home and said, my boyfriend's going to come by later. Oh, what's he aspire to be? A painter, a golfer, a doctor, a lawyer, a drag racer, a NASCAR guy. When you say he's going to be, though, a motorcycle racer, it's just always had that, I don't want to say Hell's Angel leather jacket. And maybe because I'm an old fart, I still say that, but I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. I mean, all around the country, it's just it's that way. And I've been all around the country 10 times. I've been to other places around the world. Sound is an issue. Sound and noise, and I think that the four-stroke contributes to all that.
It does.
Meanwhile, the same. I got to tell you, the motorcycle thing is funny. You go to Supercross and they're sound testing and they're real anal about that, and I guess that's good. In an instant, but then the same group is promoting monster trucks and owns that property.
That's what doesn't make sense, Dave.
Monster and you go to that, and you're numb when you hit the pillow at night to go home. But that's like boat racing or drag racing. I think certain things, I mean, if I go to a Van Halen concert back in the day, I don't want to put on earmuffs. You know what I mean? I mean, So I don't know. It's by and large, obviously the sport is thriving, but I'm also concerned, living in the U.S., a lot of tracks are closing, and that's all over the world, really, for different reasons: lawsuits, sound, this, that, just real estate. My buddy says to me, he goes, "Damn, I saw that press release or whatever I read the other day, official or not, that the 26 or 25 Hondas or 26 Hondas, whatever it is, they're not changing them much from the 25s." And I said, well, I look at that more from being in the game, that if that's really true, what do they need to do?
Yeah.
What do they really need to do? I mean, they can't put a steering wheel on it. They can't put a windshield on it.
Yeah.
They've got it. I mean, at some point, good is good.
Yeah, I think so
That
too. Yeah.
that's the old saying, bold new graphics. I mean, uh, you know, guys like the Lawrences and the Tomacs and a 450, even in the two-stroke 500 days, there's really only a handful of guys, five fingers, that can really ride those bikes to their potential.
Yeah.
So half my buddies within 10 years of me, they're all on frickin' 450s.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of funny. And then they make fun of me because I'm on an e-bike, an e-mountain bike. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're riding something that it's got more balls than you need.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, nobody really needs it. No vet or amateur or anything like that, really. No,
it's like some of my buddies went out and they bought the 80 horsepower Stark.
Yeah.
And I said, did you not see the Nick Way testing with Kiefer in tandem somewhat, where they both said, 50 to 55 was nutty enough, and what do you need 80 for? I wouldn't get my chick the biggest boobs available. Then she's going to have a bad back. I mean,
that's right.
But not everybody thinks that way. They want to, they want the anyway, but so I don't know. The sport, I follow it avidly. MXGP too. Sometimes I take in some MotoGP, which blows me away. They ride those bikes like that. I'm in awe of that. I think the sport. Look, I've always accused the AMA of having a rubber rule book. Whatever generation of people are there, I've known a lot of the good people there, and there's been a lot of good people there. But a lot of times their hands are tied. It's almost like a government agency at some point. But and a lot of times as you've seen, the favoritism, say with an RC or a Chad Reed, it's like if that was RC and Wyndham, your ruling would have been much different. Then it gets kind of political. So I'm not. I've slammed a few doors.
No worries. All right, Dave. Hey, let's get into your life.
Okay.
My favorite question of the show, of every show, and I always ask the same one. But when did the motorcycling bug bite you? When little Dave first saw a mini bike, got a mini bike, saw his mates, saw one in the shop. What was that?
It's interesting. When I was a little kid, and I shared a bedroom with my little brother, bunk beds is in those days.
Yeah.
My mom was really artsy fartsy, and she became a decorator later in her life. But in my room, she made a collage, and I was always trying to find motorcycle pictures to put on the wall that she'd kind of paste on the wall like wallpaper almost. And 99% of everything was a street bike or a sport bike.
Yeah.
And I'm talking the weaning 60s, and there wasn't no motocross action. There weren't videos. There was no internet, and there wasn't even cycle news per se. And you'd find she'd get a picture out of a magazine for a Marlboro cigarette ad, some guy riding a Triumph down the road, and laminated on my wall. Well, then my neighbor at the time, his father used to restore old 150 Jags, and they had like 3 of them in their driveway. And Daryl, my buddy, he was a couple years older than me, very mechanical. I used to go over there and hang out, and they would always use their mom's old Revereware to clean the parts in, and they would use lacquer thinner, which I wasn't sniffing it, but I was just smitten. It's almost like the 2-stroke smell,
Yeah.
And so I'd always be around. Well, then he got a mini bike. He got a Taco,
44
or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah.
And then, and he, anyway, had a slew of mini bikes. And I would always hang around. I was so enamored with that. My dad, on the other hand, was a doctor. They were into golf, tennis, and skiing. I had two brothers. My dad, in other words, my dad was very mechanical. He built furniture and stuff for a hobby. That's where I think where I got most of my abilities from, or my interest. But
Yeah.
as far as the motorcycle thing, they supported it, but they hated it at the same time. And when I mean support it, they just let me have the stuff on my walls. When it gravitated towards, I was getting about 12 or 13 and I wanted a mini bike, it was pretty negative till it wasn't. Then I got a Honda CT70
Yeah.
when I was 13. And
Was that so?
and
Was that your first bike, the CT70?
yeah, that was my first bike. and and then that I parlayed that into a Yamaha Mini Enduro.
Yep.
And again, we used to ride all around the neighborhoods, and my parents didn't even, parents back then, they didn't even lock the front door. It's
Yeah.
not that my parents were stupid,
Yeah.
but we'd be riding our mini bikes all over the back roads of our neighborhood, and
Yep.
the cops, it's not like it is now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's yeah. I mean, but and that somewhat escalated into, and I wasn't the best kid in school. Yeah, I wasn't the best kid in school. I just wasn't a book kid. I
Yeah.
wasn't a book kid. Now they have all these prefixes for that.
Yeah.
Like HRC or PTSD or whatever the hell they they label you as something.
Yeah.
I had tutors most of my life because I'd rather be outside than cooped up in
Yeah.
a chair. I never wanted to. You want to show me something? Show me some. I don't want to read it in the book. I never understood all the cowboys and Indian stuff. It all seemed like a waste of time. I mean, I took Spanish in junior high 3 times. I failed it. It wasn't because I was stupid. It's just because I didn't. It
Didn't
didn't.
interest you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Piss on that. Even
Yeah.
though it was a requirement. I mean, God, that was torture. But anyway, so the racing thing, or the motorcycle in general, it just kind of escalated. Then you meet kids in the neighborhood and you're riding the dirt lots up the street, and one thing led to another, and met some kids. I remember my first race ever was on my mini Enduro. I forged my parents' signature kind of thing, and raced. And even though I sucked, I was enamored with all the little mini kids that, like today, their parents are all into it. They support it. And even though it was kind of antiquated back then, I remember you couldn't even they didn't even make good replacement rear tires. You had to buy the stock rear tire because nobody
Yeah.
even made, and all the kids were wearing lace-up boots. It was a different time.
Yeah.
The whole game was in its infancy, but that kind of led to my path of working in the industry, so to speak. And the industry thing, that kind of came as a challenge because my 2 brothers went the college route. When I was getting in trouble, I was hanging around with some of the bad kids, and maybe a little bit of a delinquent, as they say. And my parents were very educated. My dad was a doctor, for God's sakes. And so, one day they kind of cornered me, and what are you going to do? We're at wit's end. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
And I had a Cycle magazine, and there was a story with John R. in it, John Rosensteel, who I later worked with. He was like royalty to me, but
Yeah.
there was this article on factory Hondas and this and that, Marty Smith, John R. Blah 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 blah. I told my parents I'm going to do that, and they bought it.
Yeah.
So then I know I'm skipping a lot of things, but I worked real hard, and I got with some first in school, high school. I got a job working for Al Baker R&D in Van Nuys, and we did a lot of off-road suspension kits, front and rear, and made exhaust pipes. So I was an two-stroke exhaust pipe builder for years.
Yep.
And that's where I met Jim Felt, the great Jim Felt, and Felt bicycle fame, and yeah, just an awesome guy, championship mechanic. We became friends. He kind of mentored me, and I was like a sponge for everybody. And then I locally I hooked up with Eddie Cole, who at the time was a hotshot national racer, local racer, and he had a Yamaha support ride, and I became his mechanic, and he was good pals with Bob Hanna. This is before he started Answer Products, later his fame, and now
Yeah.
661 Matrix, all that stuff. Kind of the Midas touch, as people say. But ended up going, it was again, Steve, it was such a different time. One day Eddie says to me, "Hey, we're going to do the Florida series," and he explains to me what it is and blah, 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 blah. And I go to my mom and dad. I go, "Hey, I'm going to go to Florida with Eddie Cole, and we're going to go in his van." And anyway, they blessed it, and we went to the Florida series. You're basically parked in Orlando for a little over a month or two, and some of the best tracks that unfortunately now are gone. And some of those tracks in the summer, the heat, again, to harken back to Hangtown. Hangtown was way down the ladder from those days.
Yeah.
And they didn't cut the races short. But anyway, yeah, we went to the Florida series. Eddie was very friendly with Bob Hanna. The whole Yamaha team was there. The late great Larry Carpenter, who was Rick Burgett's mechanic, he befriended me. I stayed in his room because a lot of the rooms then had two beds, and I was handy. I was helping them put on backgrounds. I could weld and stuff, and I was good at it. So I would help them reinforce their frames. I was doing all kinds of stuff beyond my own duties on Eddie's bikes, 125s Eddie was riding. And and then and Bob actually made exhaust pipes in his earlier years than Yamaha. And Bob would want raised foot pegs, and so he would do some, I would do some, or he would do one, I would do the other. And Yamaha saw all this.
Yeah.
And at one point, there was no internet, no cell phones, but we would get a telefax to the hotel, and they shipped us a box with a bunch of U-bends and different cones and stuff.
Yeah.
They wanted to merge some OW exhaust parts with production, because that's what they were riding. And I built a couple pipes for Rick Burgett's bike, and Ricky really liked the pipe or pipes, and so again that kind of opened up Yamaha's eyes to me, unbeknownst to me at the time. Like I said earlier in our conversation, that Mike Bell was burning up the local scene back home, and they just kind of merged us at one point. Just as like a trial for him and like a trial for me. And then that's not really the way it was proposed to me. I was just happy to be there, so you just kind of did it. And, but yeah, it worked out, and Mike and I were together for almost 10 years. And then, it was, those years in the sport, I wouldn't change for anything, because where I've been recently is, sure, we didn't have computers then, we didn't have EFI, but you did everything yourself.
Yeah.
There was no motor guy, there was no suspension guy,
Yeah.
there was no truck driver. I mean, we did everything. I don't
Yeah.
take anything away from the modern guy.
Yep.
But when we would have the schedule, which sometimes had more races than they have now, and we were expected to drive, clean the truck, go grocery shopping, get our bike ready, which would take about, 3 days. How do you do all that? And when I look at it now, and I've stayed back with some of the modern teams, they pull the suspension off, they put it in a suspension case, and they ship it back. They grab the refurbished spare stuff out of the truck and bolt it on. The engine comes out, goes to the motor guy, shipped back, and the new motors. But, in other words, I've been on the modern team, and say after a Supercross or a national, they get the bike done in one day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
One
Isn't
day.
it? Yeah.
It's just a one full day.
Yep.
And I don't take anything away from them, but I mean, come on, man. It's just, you know what I mean? I mean, in the old days, and I'm all for modern, I'm not knocking it, but it's just interesting. If I was on the road and my frame broke, I welded it.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, the shock needed to rebuild. And I'm not saying the modern guy isn't capable of doing that, but more power to them if they got motor guys and data guys and this guy and that guy. And, and I've been around many of the best, and every guy I've been with, even on the modern team, like say 2-2, they all brought something to the fold.
Yeah.
And maybe at the end of the day, like say Goose and I, because we were the oldest two guys on the team, for sure we had better stories than all those guys. They might have had a better happy hour story than us, but we had some stories that from a different time. So I get very irritated nowadays with a lot of these podcasters. I'm not going to name their names, but they always talk about the sport in the 90s because that was their time in the 90s.
Yeah.
And nothing against the McGrath or the Emig era, but McGrath and Emig got inspired from my generation and then some. You know what I mean? So, but every generation is what it is. I mean, I remember going when Eli was on 65s.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that, and Alessi on 65s, and so I've seen the sport from so many different things. So yeah, I mean,
do you ever think, Dave? It's something that I think about, and I was saying it to some friends just recently. In the whole history of the world, right? It's a long history that we're lucky enough to have lived through dirt bikes, because dirt bikes are pretty new. When you look at the history of the world, we're lucky enough that our lives have lined up with what we love. It's pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, it. No, it's like it. I think I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah.
For anything. I mean,
no, that's right.
I like I said earlier, I don't like the attrition at my age. Like I'm in a big wheel mini club.
Yeah.
Right. I got a YZ85. Thing's badass. It's like a little works bike to me.
Yeah.
It's not a 105. It's not a 112. It's got more than enough power the way this thing is built that it can put me in the hospital. I'm not trying to be Hayden Deegan on the thing. And my whole thing is whether I'm cycling or skiing or anything, or even if I go out for a beer, I want to be able to drive home. You know what I mean? I don't want the biggest guy in the bar taking a swing at me. If I don't feel right on that jump or that downhill, I'm going to take it a little easy, and people can say whatever they want to say. But look, even when I did my shoulder, the guy's like, oh, okay, it's about a 6 month. And I looked at that as a sentence, right? So I said to him, I go, man, that almost feels like a sentence. No, and he goes, well, you can't rush these things, and I said, but I've been around some of the riders, the athletes, they do. And so he looks at me and he goes, look, are you a professional athlete? And I said, no. And he goes, okay, then 6 months. He goes, if you want to do it in 3 to 4 months, there's I think it's called PRP. They now they do some stuff where they recirculate your blood. They take it out. I don't know if they plug it into a socket and then inject it back in, but they do something to the blood. And then there's stem cell stuff.
Yeah.
Look at Lawrence. Lawrence came back in
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah.
But everybody that has any sense knows that even though he's won all these rounds, if he puts his foot down the wrong way,
Yeah.
that leg is not 100%.
Yeah. It can't be 100%.
In my era, his injury was 6 months.
Yeah.
So, and I understand when I saw him on TV or whoever the doctor was saying that, or maybe it was Jed himself saying, oh, well, now, shit, because my foot's in a boot. But what keeps the boot from twisting?
Yeah.
Knees and shoulders in our sport are a pretty volatile thing. It seems, along with wrists lately. But yeah, and I obviously with the kids' success or who's the other one? Was it RJ Hampshire coming back?
Yeah.
Had his wrist done, whatever they did to it. I mean, the wound itself isn't even healed up yet, but I understand he's got a wife and kids, and look, if the doctor says you're good to go, also at your risk, you're good to go. So, but I think we've all seen around the world in any sport, even bowling. I mean, if he or she comes back not 100%, it could be a short-lived comeback. So, and a longer setback. So, and obviously it looks like Jet's on the way to prove me wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't wish him any ills, but I got to tell you again, in my career, I've seen so many things happen that yeah. So I've just always thought, you got to fix it the right way. Yeah, unless you're in the championship, but and he's certainly in the championship. Same with Eli, but yeah. So, but I think that happens in a lot of genres of sport,
It does. What's your favorite memories of your time at Factory Yamaha? Do you have any favorite memories? Obviously, Mike's Supercross Championship's got to be at the top, but yeah, what else?
Back in those days, certain times of the year we would merge with the European contingent when they'd come here.
Yes.
Some of those times were special for me. I was around Jared Ron. He worked out of my box van.
Yep.
When the late great Håkan Karlquist was here.
Yeah.
We were around them, Heikki Mikkola.
Yep.
Some of that stuff is priceless because they're,
yeah.
I mean,
couple of intimidating guys, those two. Intimidating like Carla
but it's funny
and
when
Heikki, like they just look scary.
But when they all have their helmets off, they're just normal.
Yeah.
They're really just like you and me, and they're actually quite funny. But yeah, I mean, just being in the infancy of the sport, and whether you were looking right or left, all the brands, because back then there was really just 4 colors, and all the brands, and you knew all the guys on all the teams. Week to week or month to month or a few races in, the linkages were changing, the radiators were changing, the brakes were changing, things were coming and going on the bikes, and it's such a rapid progression. Things got better, things got worse. Every brand has always had their ugly years of appearance. Every brand has had their trashy years of performance. Of a model or two. And I've lived all that, and I respect all that, because even like I was talking earlier, when some of these owners or prospective owners came up to me talking about starting a team, I got this rocket guy from NASA, and I got this machinist, and he, he made the propellers on the Titanic. And I said, look, dude, doesn't matter how much money you have, every race car hits the wall.
Yeah.
every bolts are going to break, things are going to bend, things are going to fail. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, especially now with all the data and all the exacting. When I was at Harley, and I was really on the inside of a bike developing.
Yeah.
You know, when you're on a factory team, a lot of times when the crews get flown to Japan to test the bikes or see what they're going to get back in the Works Bikes days, or even now, the bikes are done.
Mm.
You know, most of the crew may not be at the Roger DeCoster level where they're actually seeing drawings. And at factory Yamaha, I saw blueprints for the engines and certain
Yeah.
things. Because sometimes when if Hannah was saying the bike wouldn't shift, right away they pull out these blueprints that look like you're building a house,
Yeah.
and they would like double check things. But we were really from a blank canvas at Harley and on the Buell project, and sure, we had certain partners already through the Harley brand itself, like Showa and stuff. But what I'm getting at, you had CAD designers designing the stuff, asking me questions, and then we had a group which I never heard of before called the FEA Analysis Group, and these guys would run everything to failure and model it in a computer.
Yeah.
You know, so you could see the hot spots, cold spots. It was really amazing what they could do, and I was enamored with that. But look, even I used to tell those guys, and they would laugh at the way I would talk, but I'd say, look, even if you guys design the perfect hamburger, if you line up three guys, one of the three may spit it out.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you could design the prettiest girl and she's delivered at your house via Amazon. And the minute she walks in the house, she just may be a real big bitch. You know, it's like, so I embrace the technology, but at some point you still need to taste the burger. You need to fly the plane. The guy needs to go through the bumps, and then I've always said the bumps are much different Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
You get to the race and you plug in something I call adrenaline, which is
Yeah.
literally like plugging in your phone.
Yeah.
Because when a guy rides at the test track, say Alden Baker's place or the Star guys, when
Yeah.
they're all battling, like you hear in these interviews,
Mm.
and they say how good they feel. Do you realize in those motos, any time, any lap, any corner, any jump, if something happens to Billy Bob, he can just pull over, even if he's got to go to the freaking bathroom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no gun on the guy.
Yeah.
But when the gate drops in an AMA Supercross or an AMA National,
Yeah.
like you saw this last weekend, when the guys were with their, thank God they did the race, because Hunter didn't have his goggles, and I think Jet, Eli was the one smart guy and he had the roll offs. But even that,
That's right.
in
Yeah.
those conditions, what I'm saying is, it's just, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that is just, there's always observations you're gonna see, and embrace them or not embrace them. So yeah, I have too many. It's like, what's my favorite Van Halen song?
Yeah.
Shit,
Yeah.
on any given day, and then a Motley Crue song comes on in my van, and I may be cranking that. And in other words, I don't know that I could give you one single story,
Yeah.
or one favorite day, because I got to say, winning with Mike Bell was every bit as special as winning with Chad Reed.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Chad Reed stuff, I must admit, on any team I've been on, was more teary-eyed, because I've been around a lot of the best in the sport,
Yeah.
and a who's who. And Chad was the first guy, I'm the one that, I don't know if somebody in Oz did it, but I'm the one that coined the phrase, he gives you that white shark kind of look and that
Yeah.
stare. In other words, when I met him in his hotel that day, he comes out in flip-flops and a t-shirt and shorts at this 5-star hotel in Newport. And I heard what he had to say, and I shook his hand. I mean, I hit the ground running. I mean, this was a guy, I was so inspired that day. Even telling you about it makes my hair stand up. I was just like, wow, this guy has been kicked to the frickin' curb, and everybody's writing him. I mean, I've never been around such an underdog. I mean, people that were answering his phone were not answering his phone anymore.
Yeah.
You know, when I've been him before.
Yeah.
No, I've been him. And then at the time, he went to his wife, because Ellie told me this verbatim, and she goes, look, Dave-O, Chad came to me, and Kehoe and Mitch put the word out. I called Chad's agent. I put my own foot in the door. They didn't call me. And but Chad goes, man, this Dave-O guy, that YOT video and this and that. And he remembered me from the Yamaha days. But that guy's pretty fucking gnarly, you know. And whatever he said. And Ellie looks at him and she goes, you know, Dave-O's just like you. He's just like you.
Yeah.
And you guys have more parallels than you don't. And I think we need to give him a try, or whatever she said.
Yeah.
And that was really, it was interesting because I got to tell you, some of the wins with Chad were really emotional for me.
Yeah.
Because he was so down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and like I brought up earlier with the AMA years ago, with the fuel thing with Ricky and Yamaha and you know, God, when I got on the team and I mentioned VP, he didn't even want to have anything to do with VP. You know, he was, till he softened his stance. But I understood it. I mean, you know, I never knew what a hater was. And, you know, all the other race teams I've been on, we had good autograph lines.
Yeah.
You know, YOT, we developed this thing called the 50 at 5 with Boost Mobile. We would give away, because the Yamaha 50s at the time came 2 to a crate. Yeah. And so we would do the 50 at 5 giveaway with Boost Mobile. And it turned out so big, the promoters and Yamaha themselves made us rearrange our truck, how we parked it in the pits. Yeah. Because it was taking away from Chad's line. You know what I mean? At the time. But no, I mean, look, I won a championship at Pro Circuit, KTM, Yamaha. I mean, I've been fortunate, lucky, whatever you want to call it. I've had success pretty much everywhere. But again, I'm not afraid to ask for heat in the back of the bus. I ask a lot of questions because I know every race car does hit the wall. I tell all my young mechanics, double knot your shoes and ask a lot of questions. I'd rather you ask a question than experience a failure. You know, and in my day, probably like yours too, you know, the modern, whatever, mid-20s to 30-year-old, you know, they're glued to their cell phones. Yeah. Like I am too. But before my shoulder surgery, I went through my 85, went through the motor. My cell phone was off to the side playing music in my little garage shop. It wasn't on my shoulder, you know, and I've let guys go for that. Yeah. Because if you're that guy on that horse and he's talking to his chick about her boob job after work, and he leaves something not right on your bike. That's right. I got to tell you, when I was on 250 teams, to go back earlier when people were saying, oh, what about a 450 team as a 250 team? When we went to 4 strokes, When we went to 4-strokes, we were still practicing at a lot of the same tracks that we did on 2-strokes, mind
Yeah.
you. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Yeah.
sure same in Australia. I learned in every city and town where the damn emergency rooms were.
Yeah.
That's the difference on 4-strokes.
Yeah.
On outside of the cost and the maintenance, when a 4-stroke makes a noise, like they were doing last week, if you watched our AMA Nationals, when they were talking about jumping high and all this stuff
Yeah.
with Deegan,
Yeah.
I was, because when a 4-stroke makes a noise, you
Yeah.
got to get off of that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So, yeah, I really think things have gotten out of hand. I do kind of laugh a little bit because then you're a guy that's been around too. The factories kind of did it to themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I understand even watercraft went 4-stroke. I mean, the EPA and all that stuff around the world, but there's things they could have done. I mean, I applauded KTM when they did the 350. I thought that was badass. As far as 4-strokes go, I just think a 450 is. Again, as a fan, I enjoy watching them.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody rides a 450 like Eli does. You know, I mean, he's more forceful than the smoothness of Jet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Maybe if Jet was on the Yamaha, he'd be that way. But then again, Cooper doesn't ride his Yamaha like Eli.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely Eli.
Yeah, but no. So I think what I think. Look, even my own kid, like I said, he's in his mid-30s, designer at Fast House. We've had a 350 Husky. We've had a couple 250F Yamahas, a couple 450F Yamahas, a CRF 450 Honda. I mean, he for a while he was changing bikes, and I'm the factory mechanic for him, so it's fun for me. So we were changing bikes like socks for a while, and a lot of his bikes didn't even have 10 hours on them, and because he would just change like the wind, and we'd never lose money on them, but and I just did it to do it because it was fun for me, but and now as I talk to you, we have a 24 YZ250F.
Yeah.
And and so we got to get back on that soon, and once I'm healed up, we'll get back to some of that. But yeah, so I mean, if you look at my list of where I've been, hell, even when I was at Cagiva, as much of a nightmare as that was, we ended up winning a local title, so to speak.
Yeah. Who was that with?
That was with, we had AJ Whiting, the late Mike Healy, and Doug Dubach.
Okay, yeah.
And then that was a trip. Those bikes were so capable. It was unbelievable. Way before KTM's. They were winning world championships in Europe at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, someday I say I'm going to write a book because a lot of my experiences probably should be in a book and could be a chapter here and there. Yeah, it was that was quite an experience.
Why did you leave factory Yamaha, so 77 to 84? I think I've got that right.
Yeah, politics.
Yeah.
I was never the company picnic guy.
Yeah.
I became the odd man out. A funny story, at least for me. I was skiing at Mammoth, and in other words, 2 different psycho years, I call it. The late Ricky Johnson's father, Dick Johnson, I was very friendly with him.
Yeah.
They wanted me as Ricky's mechanic.
Yeah.
And I was called into the shop to be that guy. And supposedly, same thing happened with Ron Lachine, with late Dick Lachine.
Yep.
I got along with him. Back in those days, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, there was talk of this and that, and maybe some of the things I was involved in, weren't so cool.
Yeah.
But Yamaha called me in actually a couple times and said, "Hey, we're hearing this and hearing that," and I'm like, "Look, there's really none of that going on. It's bullshit. It's just the time."
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell stories right now that would make people's heads spin when I walked into a room
Yeah.
after a Trans Am, and I'll just say that most of the starting line was in there,
Yeah.
and what they were doing, I'm just going to not tell you what they were doing.
Yeah.
This was the late 70s, early 80s. And
Yeah.
so there was a rider's mother or two spreading some sex lies and videotape around. Yeah. I did have a buddy traveling with me at the time because Yamaha seemed to allow that. He was doing some things he shouldn't have been doing, and I was young and dumb and not paying attention because I was just focused on my job, and I think some of those things hurt me in my career, and that's basically what happened at Yamaha. That it was management changes at Yamaha. Even though I was good with this manager, I was promised these guys.
Yeah.
2 years running.
So you
And
got on well with Keith then, yeah? So was that Keith?
I got on well with Keith,
Yeah.
and I didn't get on well with Keith. He was senior. He was senior to me.
Yeah.
In other words, he was Hannah's mechanic when I showed
Yeah.
up on the scene.
Yeah.
Larry Carpenter was Burgett's mechanic.
Yeah.
They were best pals.
Yeah.
Keith got Larry the job at Yamaha.
Yeah.
So when I was with Eddie in Florida, and Larry befriended me because I would help him.
Yeah.
Keith didn't like me. Keith told Larry many times, because Larry would tell me, that he was trying to somewhat undermine my presence because he thought I was going to hurt Larry's job, which I understand.
Yeah.
But unbeknownst to Keith, at least so I assumed, Larry went to my manager at the time, Kenny Clark, and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to have what do you think of this?" And Kenny said, "Look, you put them on your expense report. Just put them in the food. Just put them on the room. He's in the room. It's not a big deal." And because Larry told me he made Kenny Clark aware of it, because Kenny said, "We need to keep." Kenny used to call me Davey, so he goes, "Keep Davey around."
Yeah.
And yeah. And so Keith and I have been good and adversarial over the years. In other words, when I got the job at YOT, I almost didn't want the job.
Yeah.
And I had to be a cowboy with them because at times it was like they almost didn't want us to do good.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that could be several chapters in itself. Even the mighty Mitch Payton, when we would joke sometimes, he'd say, "Man, not many people, survive one of his heated conversations."
Yeah.
And I had several of those, with when the Metcalfs were there. I mean, I didn't cause Yamaha Troy to slide into oblivion.
Yeah.
That happened due to the people before me.
Yeah.
Not the people, mainly the namesake. And that was a tragedy in itself. But you know what? I was hired to do what I was hired to do, and I did it. And not everybody liked it. And yeah, and then
So after Yamaha, you spent a year at after Yamaha, you spent a year at Kawasaki.
Yeah, Kawasaki was interesting because Roy Turner and I have always had a good relationship.
Yeah.
I love that guy. I got a lot of respect for him. He was one of the guys I looked up to, certainly when I was younger, even though he was on another color. You know, he's a factory Honda guy. Then he was at Cowie, and he brought me in to be in-house testing, which I did. And then that was supposed to roll into a full-time deal,
Yeah.
but then they just didn't end up having the budget,
Ah, okay. Yeah.
as they forecasted, as he thought. And I got to plug in my phone here. Hang on a
Yeah,
second.
no worries.
And that's basically what happened there. Yeah, that was a bummer. That was supposed to work into a full-time deal.
Yeah.
But I've been friendly with a lot of the Cowie guys for years. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And then you went to what was it? You sent me you good enough to send me a list to fill in, because I did have I wasn't sure of there was a couple of gaps there.
Yeah, no, there's some gap.
Answer
Well,
in 80. Yeah.
Yeah, being with Eddie Cole when he ran Answer Products.
Yeah.
I started a performance company. My first performance company, engine suspension, that kind of stuff, was going to handle Eddie's hard parts
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
performance parts. And that was somewhat of a short-lived thing. That we had an agreement where certain things were going to be done by him as opposed to me. And then in the 11th hour, basically, I was kind of left hung out to dry because in California with his distributors, he couldn't have it was appearing like he had a retail outlet in California. And rather than invite me to lunch and explain things, it was just, so our relationship was strained for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And that happens in business.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And especially in a motorcycle business is really no different than any other business. But and you could be friends one day and enemies the next day. So so that soured but yeah, and then I ended up dealing with him obviously in later years with 22 Motorsports, and kind of rekindled the thing. So we're good to this day. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. I mean, I fired guys that hated me and called Yamaha and threw me under the bus so far. I was funny. One year, Jimmy Perry calls me and he goes, "Oz, this guy just called and said, man, if I had a nickel for all the F-bombs he was saying on you, I'd buy myself and my wife a nice dinner," and then I'd run into those guys years later and they grew up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they learn what respect is and being on time. Anyway. And now they realize,
yeah,
when I was young at 19, like I told you, getting hired at Yamaha, sure, I was called into Kenny Clark's office a few times. You just are. But I never liked it, but I respected it.
Yeah.
But then when I ran these teams in various capacities, I can't tell you how many times that, as they say, the deja vu moment would come up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, like I told you earlier, people are always going to say the ups, downs, and sideways about the cop or the principal or the school teacher or the lifeguard. I mean, they're there doing a job.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a carpenter on the roof, sheeting a house, or you got your nail gun going, and I'm down on the sidewalk saying, "Hey, Steve-O, where are we going to go later to hang out?" You're working. You're under the gun. You got a weapon in your hand, so to speak.
Yeah.
You'll end up putting a freaking nail through your hand.
Yeah. I've done that.
Sometimes people would come up to me at the races. I always tried to be nice, but a lot of times I had my head up my ass because I'm working for Chad Reed. I'm working. I'm working for Mitch. I'm representing Yamaha Motor Company. I mean, you're the guy that's there with a beer and a hot dog and your chick, I mean, or your buddies running around. So, and if I hang to buy you for 5 minutes, that's, oops, I'm working.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you want to get social, that's Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Or when you park the trucks, you know, I used to tell some people, hey, if you want to come, if you really want to get an eyeful of the Supercross, come down when we park and set up.
Yeah.
Then you can run around and see everything. And you might meet a few people, but when it's Saturday,
Yeah.
you know, when it's race day, that's race day, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
It's really-
setup day, like just at the Aussie stuff and that. Like I love setup day. Like I get there early, and that's, you know, that's when you do get a chance to talk to people and you know, all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
People are different on race day to setup day. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's no pressure, you know. The only pressure you get is if you're trying to set up the circus tent and you got some weather chasing you. So that's
right. Yeah.
you know. But no, it's and obviously you see all around the world it's grown. You know, even in Europe they got those super trucks now that
Yeah. Fish
they're more
bowls,
like,
whatever they call them. Yeah.
yeah, they're more like storefronts than they are a pit area. But yeah, I think they're a little bit impersonal for the fans.
They are, I think. Yeah.
I'm enamored with them, but I just think they're a little impersonal with the fans, you know.
Yeah. Sure.
I think, yeah, for all their modernisms, I think something when they focused on them, they as nice as they are, something's lost. You know, it's just the smell is gone, the view is gone. Yeah. But I guess we'll see how that's embraced by everybody. But
Yeah.
If it comes here or not, I don't know if that's in Australia yet. But
Nah. I hope it doesn't. You know, because yeah, I like the old school trucks. You know, like yeah, being able to.
yeah, it's more personal. You know,
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, but yeah. So after that, did the Cagiva thing. The Cagiva thing was interesting because, you know, the European bikes were pretty much dying out or dead.
Yeah.
And these guys were winning world championships.
That's right. Yep.
In Europe. And so, and it was funny because they were red too, much of a darker red.
Dark red. Yeah.
But what was funny about that was the guy that hired me, Dick Burleson, the famous off-road rider here in the States. He hired me, and he had some neat ideas. You know, he wanted to have the hubs powder coated like a neon red, and you know, so I was basically telling him, man, that looks like shit. So he basically said, here, Davo, you can have the keys to the car, do what you want.
Yeah.
So I got the whole team to be clothed by Answer Products. They had an in-house sewing shop.
Yeah.
So I got with the designers from our helmets to the clothes. It was red, white, and green.
Yeah.
With some hints of black. The Cagiva colors. Some guy said the riders look like a Christmas tree. But with the bright Kawasaki green color on the pants. On a start, if Hondas were up front, which were plentiful back then, we would almost get lost in the shuffle. So I engineered this gear with Answer. They were all down with it, and it was really unique because if you look at some of the old pictures of Healy and Whiting, they really stood out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what was funny about that, it was Healy, Whiting, and Dubach.
Yeah.
And whoever won the series, the Golden State Series, was going to get the ride. There would be, out of the three guys, we would pick two guys to ride the Nationals.
Yep.
And Dubach thought I screwed him, but he really screwed himself. So at the time, the Italians were really overbearing. They had a in-house guy, Morielli, that was out of control.
Yeah.
But he made the things really fast, and I had to deal with him. Plus, there were so many hands in the cookie jar on the domestic side almost like trying to micromanage me. It was really ridiculous.
Yeah.
And again, maybe I'll put that in a book someday. And I'm not shy to name who their names were because they gave me a lot of headaches. But at the end of the day, when it came time, you know, Whiting and Healy's bikes were pretty much controlled by Morielli and me. Dubach was different. When I got the job, Dubach was being looked after by the Race Tech guys.
Yeah.
And they were breaking every rule in the book. They had Kawasaki clutch plates. Anyway, whatever they were doing, I'll save for the book, and nothing against Paul Feed. But I told Paul and I told Doug, look, you guys are alienating yourself regardless of what your results are. This is the Japanese, or excuse me, this is the Italians' bike. And if something's gonna, if we know better, or you can make an improvement, they got to see their shit break first.
Yeah.
They're paying the bills.
Yeah.
Paul Feed isn't paying the fucking bills. You know,
Yeah.
they're giving you so you can't put Kawasaki clutch plates in there, even though they fit or whatever the hell they were just doing a lot that was really, so
Yeah.
it really should have been Healy and Dubach for the Nationals.
Yeah.
I was accused, I was good buddies with the Whitings, let's face it, but Doug thought I picked the Whitings because of that. No,
Yeah.
dude, I picked Whiting because you just weren't a team player.
Yeah.
You know, and that really pissed off the Italians. And and the Italians, by the way, they were paying me.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's so hard to understand about that? You screwed yourself. I understand you wanted to do whatever you needed to do. But anyway, without dwelling on that too long, Doug's a good guy. But it was just, that's just how it was then.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just.
Do you get on well with Doug nowadays?
I don't have much contact with him, if any.
Yeah.
I've hired and combined him here and there. Yeah, I mean, if he still has some animosity, I mean, look, I mean, there was a rider that went out with my one girlfriend, and I still haven't, my on again, off again girlfriend, I still haven't got over that. It still comes up once in a while, so I'm not going to name his name. Pretty prominent guy. My one buddy said, "Oh, you should be flattered that he went after your chick." I said, "No, it just shows me what a piece of shit the guy is." But, and I still think of him that way. But because I'm not that way. But you know what I mean? It's everybody's different. But yeah. And then after that Kajiva thing, then I got back into business again. But there was a little hiatus. I got involved in a family business with my brother. You know, because sometimes the motorsports industry, it takes so much out of you, chews you up and spits you out, as you've heard about some other people in other genres of life where they just walk away from it for a week, a month, a year or two. You know, it's like taking a break out of college where you just where you need a year or two off.
Yeah.
You know, you take that break.
Righto, it's time for an ad read. Guts Racing, gutsracing.com. That's a real easy website to remember. You guys know that Guts makes seat covers. They also make complete seats, seat bases, seat foam, including the ultralight seat foam, custom seats with wide wings, with bumps, 2 tall seat options, Velcro fitment covers, the optional ballistic material, covers for ATVs, covers for Cirons, and an incredible range of colours. If you can think it, they will have it. As used by Ken Roxon, Jed Beaton, Malcolm Stewart, Luke Clout, Kai DeWolf, and our guy Scott Meshy, who says they are a butt gripper and they will make you a ripper. And get yours at gutsracing.com. That's a real easy website to remember. gutsracing.com.
Because I've been with Metcalf a couple times, Chad Reed,
Yeah. Sharky.
and yeah, Sharky. I brought him over here. That was an interesting thing. Love that guy. So tragic what happened. Loved his wife Natalie, and that was just. It's funny, we butted heads initially.
Yeah.
I brought him here, and I did the whole thing. Got him here, number 2 in the world.
Mm.
I hired him for outdoors, not Supercross. But then when he came here, when Yamaha made a major change, the excuse me, the intake valves were breaking, intake and exhaust randomly.
Yeah.
Let's just say what I call the mothership wasn't truthful about what was happening in the beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, that started some of them calling me a cowboy, but you do what you got to do. But anyway, and that was kind of, if you remember, a lot of the teams going from 2 strokes to 4 strokes. Once they started, you got to realize when the companies make 250Fs, for the public, they would develop them, as you've probably seen, riders all over the world develop these bikes, 250s, 450s. Well, at the time then, they would never, the only people riding Supercross were the professionals.
Yeah.
Even the local tracks didn't gravitate towards Supercrossy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Type situation. So, when you modified those initial production bikes and then threw them under a professional in the whoops, 4th or 5th gear, they'd be breaking cases and gearboxes and you name it.
Yeah.
In other words, the companies learn the hard way that at some point in pre-production, we need to get these bikes on a Supercross with some test riders.
Yeah.
And put some hours on them, because this bike could actually go to a family that is going to do this.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be like Mitch Payton and commission their own gearboxes for a small fortune out of England, from some F1 place. So I got some at YOT. When I at YOT one day at the Yamaha test track, it was all my guys, Metcalf, McFarlane, all the Star guys then, and the Star guys. We were the A team. Star was the B team.
So was that would have been, who was on Star then? Was that like the Johnsons? Like
and Sean Collier and guys like that.
Yeah.
And they were all capable.
Yeah.
But they're at the test track. We're at the test track, the Yamaha test track. And Chad was there. And it was funny. I was acquainted with Chad.
Yeah.
But Frenchie knew him better. Frenchie was a French-Canadian guy on my team. He was my motor guy.
Yeah.
And like my right-hand guy, so to speak. And Frenchie at the time was doing our motors, and he was like the crew chief.
Mm.
And what was funny was I was so frustrated with our guys in the whoops, even the Star guys. And none of the guys were going through the whoops really with what I call any commitment. And I understood it was practice. Why go to the hospital during the week? But then you can't get to the race and think you're going to be in the front runners if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah.
So I would talk to the gallery of guys sitting there, and they would kind of give me some shit back, which I would respond to. And they would say their comments, whatever the hell they were at the time. So Frenchie and I got together and we're like, look, let's have Chad ride the bike. Let's see if Chad will ride the bike. So Frenchie goes over and talks. I go, fuck, go, Frenchie. You know him better than me.
Yeah.
So he walks over there. They were essentially done. Chad was still in his gear. And anyway, Chad comes walking over, and he hopped on McFarland's bike, sat on it for a minute, you know, felt the levers, this and that, pushed his boot on the brake pedal. It was all very mesmerizing, and
Yeah.
he kind of fucked with his goggles a little bit, starts the thing up, and he circulated this one part of the track a couple times, you know, just to get familiar with the power. You know, he just hopped off a 450.
Yeah.
Actually, Heath Voss and him were there that day,
Yeah.
and on their 450s, and these were steel framers then,
Yeah.
I believe. My memory serves me. Anyway, doesn't matter. So then Chad, he goes over the big jump, does this right turn, goes through a couple rhythms, but he skipped the whoops just like 2 laps, but they weren't full laps of the Supercross track. He was
Yeah.
just doing this one abbreviated area. And all of a sudden we hear the RPMs build, and he goes into the whoops, and you could hear him grab high gear, and he went through the whoops like Fred Astaire in a video when it's raining. And
Yeah.
and if you knew me, I get pretty animated, and I'm a kind of a high energy guy. People tease me, but I got to tell you, I had a gallery of guys, as you can imagine, sitting on the dirt pile,
Yeah.
and I was like 2 feet off the ground going, did you fucking see that? I said, don't ever tell me a blue 250 won't go through the whoops in high gear. I mean, I said that 3 times, and I couldn't fucking believe it. And Thad, I got a buddy named Thad. Chad went through the whoops a few times like that. I
Yeah.
think he made 2 or 3 passes. I think 3. And then he rode over and gave the bike back to Frenchie, and we said a few words, and you know, thanks, man, and all that. And he walked off. And again, I went back to the guys. I go, don't none of you guys have an excuse anymore. You know, the only guy here that maybe has somewhat of an excuse is Andrew, because he was more of a GP guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you guys, you know, and that was years after, because when I first got YOT, Kelly Smith, Danny Smith, and Brock Sellers were the riders.
Yeah.
All nice guys separately, but together they were my nightmare, and
Yeah.
they were all overpaid. They all should have retired way before I got there, but the
Yeah.
former owner just lined their pockets and signed them. And they were all, like I said, I liked them all separately. They were
Yeah.
all good guys. They were
Yeah.
all accomplished guys, but this was the downside of their career when I inherited them.
Yeah.
So they were, yeah, they weren't even in those days. Yamaha was telling me that we couldn't go through the whoops in high gear because the transmission wouldn't handle it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
some of the blame for that was on Yamaha not making
Yeah.
factory gearboxes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the 250Fs in Europe weren't riding Supercross.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So Yamaha, I understood it. Yamaha didn't want to make factory gearboxes for the 250Fs for only 3 guys riding them in the States. You know, they weren't, in actuality, they weren't thinking of it right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, their competition was making gearboxes.
Making gearboxes. Yeah. Mitch. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if Factory Connection was, but I know Mitch was.
Yeah.
God, when I worked for Mitch, man, I mean, Mitch is a badass. Love him or hate him. I mean, if the potential's there and he can pull it off, he'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think inspired Factory Connection and Star Racing to this day.
Yeah.
Was getting their ass kicked so many times by that guy.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, because even though he's a factory supported entity, even if Cowie is going to do it, it may not be in the schedule of what Mitch needs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Mitch will still do it, but yeah. So so I did another business after Kajiva, but you know, what was that, 91, 94, with a partner, Wide Open Racing. I imported exhaust systems from Europe, Schlachtan pipes, and silencers, and I brought in MXA seat and graphics. And that time around the world, there was Technicell in Europe, MXA in Europe, seat covers and graphics. Here in California, there was really just seat. Remember CEET in San Diego? And there was Technicell, Terry Good, that now has the motorcycle museum trying to go. Terry Good was the importer for Technicell. And I actually used to buy stuff through Terry Good, but a lot of times I felt like I was getting stroked around, admittedly, by him or whatever was going on. I wasn't getting my orders. I was having to return people's money. And I was very friendly with Jamie and Julian Dobb of you know, England fame. And I brought Jamie over here as he stayed with me and his brother with my wife in our house for a while when he was an amateur. Really a good family, and we became good friends. So through them, I got hooked up with Schlachtan, Spez in Belgium, and MXA Seat and Graphics, and that's how I built my business.
MXA was out of England,
MXA was out of England, and they had really ahead of their time type stuff, like Technicell. They were really pushing the boundaries beyond what Seat was doing. Seat was just basically printing on smooth. But you know, Clive was a nice guy. The guy that ran
that was cool though. The seat stuff was cool. You know, like the stripes and the zebra
it was
print
cool.
and
But
all
it was
that
basically
sort of stuff. Very
it was
nice.
basically just it's silk screened on vinyl material. Whereas MXA and Technicell were actually using imprinted fabric for grip and this and that. So it kind of elevated it. And but then the EPA even bit us in the ass because they were buckling down on petroleum-based products being brought into the United States.
Okay,
And our adhesive was it wasn't 3M adhesive. That's what all the guys here were using when they did direct screening. We had some stuff that was pretty gnarly. But every now and then you'd get a bad batch, and the fuel in the tank would, as you probably remember seeing, would bubble it off and this and that. So you know, every now and then you had to warranty stuff. But that was a fun run till my partner and I kind of separated due to some things. Then it was funny. I was walking around the pits at Glen Helen, and I bumped into my buddy Ron Heben, who was the manager at KTM at the time. And Ron and I were shooting the shit in the pits, and good to see you kind of thing. And he said he took over for Mike Bell when I left him. And the story of Mike Bell is kind of interesting. Nobody really knows it but me. Maybe his two brothers. But I've never really told it to anybody except some of my close friends. And that was an unfortunate thing. But so Ron says, "Hey, I need a coordinator for the team." And then I got hired, and then I was kind of sucked back into the vacuum cleaner of the racing game. And then KTM, for whatever reason, blew Ron Heben out of there when he kind of set up the whole place and did a great job, I thought. They brought Larry Brooks in there. They brought Larry Brooks in there. And I wasn't one of his hires. He basically blew everybody out. It was his hire. And I was probably running my mouth a little too much in the shop behind his back, because I just, the guy would show up, have 4 Red Bulls a day, and you're supposed to deal with that,
Yeah.
you know. But he was the boss. I wasn't. Anyway, one day I was blown out of there. I got called in. It was him and this HR guy in this room. They wanted me to, they wanted me to sign this thing, which I don't to this day think I did. It was all a bunch of just made up stuff just to get me out of there. Because even when they were saying it to me, I look at the HR guy, I go, where's my warnings? Where's my this? I know what HR is about.
Yeah.
You can't just call me into this room and hit me with a truck. I mean, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
You're supposed to get me in here. Where's my 3 warnings or my 3 strikes before I'm out? So it was basically like I would agree to leave. So I did.
Yeah.
That
If it's like that, you don't want to stay anyway, do you? So,
well, that's why in some interviews I've said if I was in the middle of the Mojave Desert and Larry was hitching a ride, I'd skid up there, make him run up to my car, and then I'd freaking haul ass. Because he's just that kind of personality. He may be better to this day. Who knows? Maybe we'd get along fine.
Yeah.
But there's just some things that happen in life in your career you just don't forget. Even if I brought it on myself, it's just, you got to realize when I worked for Mike Bell, I was in Indian Dunes in the box van one day with Mike. The station wagon pulls up and parks adjacent to us. It's Larry's mom with Larry's factory R&D Suzuki 80 on bumper racks. And he comes up to me and like he's jerking on my pants leg. Pardon me, sir. Can I get a couple stickers? So I gave him a couple Mike Bell stickers.
Yeah.
Because I've got a few years on Larry, obviously. But that was then. Obviously, he's done a good job for some teams and won some championships, and so yeah. But I'm sure he's got stories about people too. So we all have our stories.
Yeah.
But
and then after KTM, that's when you went to PC.
Yeah, PC. I've gotten guys jobs at PC, and I always tell them, I'm not going to stick my neck out for you, so don't let me down. But having Mitch on your resume is almost the best thing you can have. And I will say, 1 year at Pro Circuit is like 3 everywhere else.
Yeah.
He's gnarly. He may be softer now. I got a lot of respect for the guy. And when I left to go to YOT, he didn't want me to leave. In the beginning, he called me out like I was just the biggest waste of his time and biggest POS and a big mistake. And I wouldn't even talk to my dog the way he talked to me in the beginning. But I toughed it out. Look, when I went in the back, it's funny, when he rolled me into the back, I felt like I was the new crew member on a pirate ship.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of the mechanics. I might have been acquainted with them just visually in the pits.
Mm.
But, he rolls me into the back, as I say. He introduces me, and he basically says, this is Dave-O. He's my right-hand man. And, whatever he says goes. Anyway, just, and then he just, in his wheelchair, he just does an about face, and he's gone as quick as we got there. If you had a problem with Dave, you got a problem with me kind of thing, and he rolls away.
Yeah.
And then I'm just standing there looking at these guys. They're looking at me, almost like with toothpicks in their mouths, twirling, like a bunch. I didn't know what was going to happen, if I was going to get lynched. But, over time, I'd clean the toilet or I'd do certain things. And they're like, wow, this guy's not above us. He's like one of us. He used to be us. So I kind of earned their respect.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to lie. There were days I'd go out in the parking lot, sit in my truck just to breathe.
Yeah.
No, just to breathe. And when the YOT thing came up, he rolls into me one day, because you got to realize after hours, some of the Honda management would show up there. sometimes Jimmy Perry would walk in there,
Yeah.
who was at Yamaha, Mitch's old guy,
Yeah.
one of Mitch's formers rather. And I get on good with Jimmy, but Mitch rolls up to me one day in the office and he goes, "Hey, are the rumors true?" And he's looking up at me because he's in his wheelchair. And I said, "Pardon me?" I'm playing dumb and I'm trying to figure out my script.
Yeah.
And and again, he says, "Are the rumors true?" And I'm looking down at him. I'm like, fuck, what am I going to say? It's like a cold sweat. And he goes, "I don't want you to go. But are they true?" And I said, "Yes, they're true. They're talking to me." And whatever we said, I don't remember exactly. And it wasn't adversarial, but he basically gave me an ultimatum. He's like, "Look, I don't want you to go. I think he said, you got 2 weeks or something.
Yeah.
Like you
Make a
got to let me
decision,
know in
yeah.
2 weeks." And he fucking rolls out, and I'm like, wow, I take a breath of air. But I respected him. I was in his chair in his office. I got to tell you, to do what he did after what happened to him, love him or hate him, and his success, you got to respect him. I mean, and we've had some instances over the years because again, he's a real high profile guy. And I could have a whole chapter about him too.
Bet, yeah.
I mean, look in the McGrath book. I mean, Jeremy says right in there. I've never read the book, but people have told me one excerpt is that Jeremy says how Mitch made him cry.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you how he made me feel a few times, but I'll just leave it at that. But yeah. So after that, the YOT thing happened. That was when I went to, not so much interview, but when I went to Yamaha Motor Company, it was Keith Guerra, Mike Guerra, Jimmy Perry, the team owner. We're in the room with the big IndyCar table, the oval table in the big conference room. I was sitting next to the team owner who I had just met, never met him before, only talked to the jackass on the phone. And then when the meeting was over, we're walking out of the Yamaha building, the Catella building. We're right near the lunchroom, and Jimmy puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Well, Ozzy, I guess we'll be seeing you around soon." And I look at him as I'm shaking his hand goodbye, and I go, Jimmy, I don't know if I even want the fucking job. Because that team, the team had so much success and carried so much weight in that class, that due to the vices of the team owner, and he had a lot of good people there. Like I said, a lot of good success. Some people, there was a lot of negativity towards me in the beginning when I did some interviews. Some of the people like, Dave, you're a piece of shit for saying that and this. I said, look, I'm not against you. I never mentioned your name, as a matter of fact. But when I got hired here, in the first month or two, I never had to say I was sorry to so many people for something I didn't do in my whole life. Sponsors, clothing, goggles, oil, tires, you name it. They were all kind of hung out to dry from this guy. And I didn't create that, but now I'm the new guy. And I got to call them up and say, hey, will you still deal with us? It was like reviving a dead dog. And so like I said, one of their engine guys was pretty negative to me and this and that. And I said, look, if you're taking it personal, I understand that because you were there for all his successful years. But, part of my getting the keys to the city is I got to try to turn this ship
Yeah.
around. Because, this thing sank, I mean, when parents after Loretta's or some of these races, when they were talking about Pro Circuit or Factory Connection, they also spoke of
Yeah.
YOT.
Yeah.
They weren't doing that anymore. And as Keith McCarty kind of pounded into me, we need to get our bling back. You're going to bring
Yeah.
it back. Anything that goes on under that tent is your deal, and we'll back you up.
Yeah.
But they didn't always do that. But it was a gnarly thing, trying to get a top 3 divisional team in that
Yeah.
division to come back from
Were
the
you
ashes.
were you there for J Law's championship?
No, but I'm the guy that hired
Yeah,
J
yeah.
Law, and that's probably why I have tinnitus to this day from Keith screaming at me so much. And it came to a point at the end of every year to hire riders. I would make a list on a Post-it, and I would tell Mike Guerra. All the conversations were usually with Mike Guerra first. Mike was way more civil. Dealing with Mike, I used to tell Mike, Mike, no disrespect to these riders, their families, but I'm picking from the ashtray of what's left.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to come here. We're starting to turn that corner, but we're the Camaro of the class.
Yeah.
Everybody else has improved. The namesake, the Yamaha itself, not what we do to it, but the bike has evolved. You guys are just resting on your laurels, and I'm just picking from the ashtray of what's left. And they would give me guys on their short list. And a lot of times, Steve, I was negative to their choices.
Yeah.
Terrible choices. The guy was too big, for example. One guy was I won't name his name, but he was an arena cross guy. He was a winner in arena cross, but arena cross isn't motocross or supercross.
Yeah.
Arena cross, you really only need a bike to start off the line and maybe one more gear. You could eliminate 2 or 3 gears in the transmission in those days. And this guy should have been riding a big bike. And they wanted to put him on a 250F, and I called him a Neanderthal. No disrespect to the guy, but he's physically, he's a big, strong kid, but he should be on a 450. Yeah. So when the J-Law thing happened, I told Frenchie, under the radar from Yamaha, we're going to have some test days. Again, no internet, no nothing. We had some test days I arranged, and we just called the guys up or their agents. We had Jared Brown one day at Glen Helen. We had J Law. Anyway, and I think we had a couple 250Fs there, our race bikes. And I had talked to Jason's manager, Scott Sipkovic, because we've been buddies for 50 years.
Yep.
And I'm still friendly with him to this day, as far as I know. I haven't seen him in a while, but we've always had good rapport. And when Jason rode that bike, it was just magical. He was like a breath of fresh air. He was like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
It was, he was polite. And he made everybody else look like they were in frickin' reverse.
Yeah.
He was kind of like a Jet Lawrence of the day for that division.
Yep.
I mean, especially for us. So we made it happen. And again, that's probably why I have my tinnitus. I never was screamed at so much from Keith in my life, or upper management, as I say there. A lot of times I would hold the phone away from my head. And the guys in the box van would hear him chewing me out.
Yeah.
And we were coming back from 395 one day, and we tried out Jake Weimer prior to him winning a championship for Mitch.
Yeah.
And in fact, during those years, Mitch and I were kind of trading guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had Jessamine, he had Jessamine. In other words, we were driving home in the box van. I can't remember if I was driving or Frenchie. We had a few guys, mechanics in the van too. We had a sleeper, like the old Honda vans. And in fact, it was an old Honda van. We're on 395 working our way back to Valencia to the shop. And I think Keith screamed at me for 5 miles. And then I called Guerra. I wasn't going to quit, but I'm like, I don't even work for you fucking guys. Who the hell is he to talk to me like that? I mean, the only other guy that's talked to me like that before was Mitch.
Yeah.
But no, Keith was fucking brutal. But at the end of the day, you'll love this because I think you know who he is. I told Guerra, tell me the fucking difference between my choice and your choice years ago for road racing. You had the Jason Lawrence of road racing on the Yamaha, who, if he wasn't winning for you, you were getting him out of jail. You know what I mean? The Australian guy. You know who I'm talking about.
For road racing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's escaping me right now. Anthony Gobert.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep.
And I said, Lawrence is your frickin' Gobert. And you sure seem to love Gobert when he won. You didn't like his after hours activity, and I understand that. But this kid is just like him. And I think he's going to bring his success. So anyway, you had to be there. But my wife and I were sitting in the stands that year when he clinched the championship. And when he got on the podium, everything in place was pretty much what I did, outside of whatever they did when I wasn't there. But he thanked me on the podium.
Yeah.
He thanked me on the podium. Yeah, so that was cool. Yeah, then after that, the Buell Harley thing came up. That was funny. I get back from a mountain bike ride, and my wife's like, "Hey, you got to listen to the answering machine." And I listened to the answering machine. I thought it was one of my buddies playing a joke because the guy says, "Hey, it's Eric Buell and blah blah blah. We got an opportunity for you and this and that and the other thing." I played it a couple times. I go, God, I bet that's one of my pals playing a freaking joke, because I was actually between things then. And I called my one buddy who's all into sport bikes, and you know, he owned one of those RC 51 Hondas, and he's been my fabricator for the last 40 years, 50 years. A good friend of mine, this guy Bruce. I called Bruce and I go, "Hey, who the hell is Eric Buell? Is Eric Buell a real thing?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, I go, "I got this message." And I told him, and he goes, "Well, what number did he leave you?" I go, "Oh, that's smart." So my wife and I checked the area code, and it was a Wisconsin number. So I tell Bruce, I go, "It's a Wisconsin number, Bruce." And he goes, "Look, that's where Harley Davidson is. This is legit. You need to call that guy back." So I called him back. Then they flew me out for an interview. When I flew back there, the weather was freezing. Everything was in the belows. And it hurt to walk outside. And everything was white. It's Wisconsin. It was wintertime. It was right around Thanksgiving time, like November, I think it was. And anyway, I took the job. They pitched me on. They wanted to develop a 450. It was already going when they hired me. And Eric was Buell was like the eccentric side of Harley Davidson, if you know anything about Buell.
Yeah, I remember the street bikes.
Eric's a pretty forward thinker. He's got numerous patents for cycling, mountain bikes, suspension designs, as well as brake designs. He's really a forward thinker. In fact, I tell people all the time, I don't care who the hell you are, whether it's Ducati, Honda, any of the Japanese, European sport bikes, they're all bred off of what Buell did years earlier.
Yeah.
The low center of gravity, the exhaust systems, just the whole basic layouts of the bikes. That, as far as I'm concerned, that all came from Eric Buell's playbook. See, he was the illegitimate, he was the Jimi Hendrix side of Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
And really a bright guy. And when he hired me, he told me, he goes, look, I didn't hire you to be liked. I hired you for your experience. I developed a lot of phrases for myself because Buell was basically an engineering company.
Yeah.
Most of the guys there, they might have known what motocross is, but they weren't motocross. If they had any property, they rode their quads or ATCs around it. Most of them were sport bike guys, but basically engineers. I was probably the dumbest guy in these meetings, in every meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't have, the only degrees I had on the wall were my School of Hard Knocks and my thermostat. These guys, these men and women were pretty crazy. And sure, I'm enamored now with the Triumph and the Ducati. When I got hired at Buell, our design path was a Honda. Why not? It was the leading seller. But a lot of our stuff was limited as far as what we could do and what we couldn't do. And then what's funny, when the project ended a year later, I had to sign this non-disclosure, which was probably an inch thick.
Yeah.
So I've really never done a proper interview on Buell. I would talk about it now because it's that ship has sailed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's under a different
nowadays,
owner now. It's a whole different entity. It's even in a different state. And I think the statutes of limitations for them to find me and shoot me are over with. But I took the bike personally because even though it wasn't my name on the project, I didn't want it to fail. And who knows?
Yeah.
I might have quit before they pulled the plug anyway.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it was getting out of hand. Let's just say a lot of the design path they strayed from due to cost and just being stupid. And I used to tell those guys, like I told you, I would invent terms. Like I'd start in a meeting when it was my turn to talk. A lot of times, Steve, I would start out by saying, okay, guys, no disrespect, but
yeah.
I always used to say that.
Yeah.
Because I did respect them all, but they didn't respect me. I also called myself the end user.
Yeah.
In one meeting, they used to say to me, what's your data to support that? What's your data to support that? Every other word out of their fucking mouth was, I'd say, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. Someday we're going to parallel park with Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, KTM. We have to be as good as KTM, let alone the Japanese. We just got to be as good as a KTM. You guys, I mean, come on, you guys. And it was really, yeah, man, it was like, I would give examples to a room with engineers going, look, when you look at a road atlas in the old days, to go from this race to this race, you would chart out the best possible way, barring any weather.
Yeah.
In other words, I don't see why that's any different than what we're doing here. But what we're doing here, you guys swerve due to cost. You swerve due to somebody's decision based on cost. I mean, do you guys want to sell these things or do you want to die with these things? And I used to tell them sometimes, due to my relationship with Jody Weisel, or they'd be asking about test riders and stuff months before they should even be questioning that.
Yeah.
I said, I may just fly out some of my buddies. Well, who the hell are your buddies? Oh, some of my buddies are old local pros. They're a KTM buyer. They're vet racers to this day.
Yep.
In other words, if it's not viable for them, I don't want to approach Jody Weisel, because if we give a bike to Jody Weisel and it's not good, back in the day when you think of 07, Jody Weisel was the shit. There was no Racer X per se. There was no Steve Mathis or Kiefer testing, whatever.
Yeah,
the fuck.
MXA was
it's
it.
like,
yeah,
media was very shallow then, and so, if Jody doesn't bless this, you may as well light that warehouse on fire.
That's it. Yeah, that's how much.
No, so a lot of the guys
weight he carried. Yeah,
it was funny. One night, I was waiting for Tommy to clean up whatever he was doing, so I was waiting in my cubicle area. Everybody was gone. I'm just sitting at my desk in the cubicle. This one guy comes up to me, the lead engineer over all the engineers, like the governor of the engineers.
Yep.
And I thought he liked me, but he comes up to me and he was like 6'2" or 3, towered over me. We're standing out near outside of my desk. And we're standing literally in the cubicle hallway. I don't know why we were talking there. That was his deal. But I think because he could look around and see if there were any heads still in their cubicles. And that's what he did. And then he proceeded to pound me. And then at one point I said, "Are you done?" I said, I didn't hire myself here. I used that line again. I didn't hire myself. I was sought out, brought in here, accepted the role. I got nothing against any of you guys or girls I'm working with. In fact, I respect all of you. I'm not that book smart. I don't have the infinite engineering prowess you guys have. But what I do have is I double knot my shoes. You'll never see my shoe untied. And I'm the end user. At some point, I said, we're going to have Ford money and Harley money, and I'm going to have a semi, and we're going to be based in California, and we're going to have a race team. And we're going to parallel park amongst everybody that was there first. Do you understand that? And I said, if you got a freaking problem with me, you need to go back and talk to the guy with the glass office and tell him what's going on. Because he told me this would happen. He warned me this would happen. And he knew it would come, and here you are. And that was a few months into it, it was an interesting situation. I learned a lot there. But at the end of the day, realistically, I would close out the story with them saying it's actually a good thing they did pull the plug, because I think they really lost sight of their goals due to a lot of other reasons.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I look, where I get my Yamaha parts, my local dealer, Steve, he's also a Triumph dealer. And a lot of times when I go in there, I love looking at the Triumph sport bikes.
Yeah.
This is when you first started hearing the rumors of Triumph. And I know Triumph's not the Triumph you and I grew up with.
Yeah.
But and I'm buddies with all the sales guys there. So I would look at the Triumphs and talk to them about them. The quality and the construction of those bikes, as opposed to a R6 that was all equally on the floor.
Yeah.
The Triumphs were every bit Ducati-ish in their own way. And when I say Ducati-ish, when you're going down the road and you see a Super Duke go by, or you hear a Ducati and you don't see it, Like when I'm driving around in my van or in the wife's car, she's with me. If the window's down, which I do a lot, when you hear a Ducati, you don't even really need to see a Ducati. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then when you see the Ducati, that's one thing KTM ripped off from them, is it the Ducati and the Aprilia and the KTM, as far as I'm concerned, they knocked off a lot of the styling from Ducati because they're just kind of timeless. And Buell had some qualities like that too. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, some of those guys are just, and then the project ended, and then it was stagnant for a while. And but during that time in 07, a lot of what killed the project was the timing with the EPA in the United States and Europe, the sales guys here that packaged it.
Yeah.
They made they and I got friendly with those guys too. We'd go out for pizza and stuff, have a few beers, and I'm like, you guys invented all these sales projections on a fucking napkin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you sold it to the Harley brass. Good for you guys.
Yeah.
But now you're backpedaling, because at the time, sound and emissions in 07 in Europe was even bigger than here.
Yeah.
And that's really what kind of killed the project. Plus, the project was severely behind even when I got there. Yeah. And I'll save that story for another day, because I think it's a long, interesting story.
Mm.
And like I said, I was surrounded by a bunch of bright people, but it's amazing what a bunch of bright people can and can't do. That's all
Yeah.
I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. And I'll just leave it at that. Like I said, when I saw the Triumph, when they first got the dirt bike in there, and I saw one of the first ones, the 250, based off their sport bikes. I mean, just the frames alone are beautiful. The welds, and now you see what Ducati's doing. I don't know if I agree with either company's timing.
Yeah.
Not that they should have gone electric, but should they have done it at all? I guess we'll see. At least where I live, there's racetracks closing down, and I'm all bummed out about that. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but yeah, we just got some crazy shit going on in the United States. Again, between real estate pricing and lawsuits and sound, tracks are getting shut down.
Yeah. Ours is we've probably lost more tracks actually to development. And I
You mean
guess sounds part of
housing and stuff?
housing. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
no, real estate pricing. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times they're just they want to put 1 million homes there. So
yeah.
the proprietor of the track just wants to cash out. And I understand that, but a lot of it, there's some parts of the United States, I'm sure in Australia, you go into your local racetrack, you sign a waiver. That should be enough. Some states have a cap on those waivers, but in California, which you see burning up on the TV, my home state is kind of effed up, and you could sue till the cows come home, whether it's a good lawsuit or a bad lawsuit.
Yeah.
If you're the racetrack and you lose, you get a couple of those, and the insurance company wants to drop you unless they raise the premiums through the roof. So one of my favorite tracks where I live, 40 minutes from my house, 45 minutes, recently shut down due to that. I think some of it, a lot of the racetracks I think are negligent on their own part, because you've seen it. You go to pay to get in, and you see people going in 50 directions, not their dogs are running around or riding around on UTVs or mini bikes, and people racing in the pit. So I think a lot of tracks do themselves a disservice in the first place.
Yeah.
This one track that closed, I'm bummed out about it, but I do believe a lot of the closure was on them, as well as the people that sued them. if they would have been paying more attention, this one lawsuit probably wouldn't have happened. You
Yeah.
know, but look, tracks have been lawsuits happen for the most trivial things. So
Yeah.
but beyond, and then after the YOT thing kicked around a little bit, I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth for the industry again. Anyway, then I landed at KTM in 08. I was supposed to be the amateur czar at KTM, and that was an interesting thing. Yeah, that was almost like Yamaha, where I was just a prop. They really didn't want me to do a good job.
Yeah.
And like when I first got in there, I got a legal tablet, one of those yellow tablets.
Yeah.
And I arranged a thing for all the amateur parents. I wanted to meet with all the amateur parents because none of them were happy. And I'm talking Michael Hall's parents, Jason Anderson. We had a lot of good kids that are now stars today, but then they were just good amateur kids.
Yeah.
And they came from the mini Olympics and then some, where KTM really didn't live up to their contracts and their follow through and whatever the hell they were doing. And here I'm plugged in there, right? I mean, I didn't even know where the good places to eat lunch were. And so I called all the families in there separately, kind of interviewed them all, wrote down my pros and cons. Well, the guy that hired me, Kurt Nicole of MXGP fame, he called me into a room and he pretty much said, what the fuck are you doing? And I go, well, how am I supposed to right the wrongs here if I don't know the rights and wrongs? I mean, I said, none of the parents are happy. A lot of these parents, they could have signed with Yamaha or Kawasaki or this. They went this way. And you guys promised them suspension testing with WP and special parts from WP and X amount of bikes and this and that. Da, 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 da. My con column, I told Kurt Nicole, for each family was longer than the likes.
Yeah.
The only thing they really liked was some of the personnel. They liked the bikes. They liked the initial promises. But then as far as the follow through, that's all on the con columns. He wasn't happy I did that at all. And and like I said, I was just trying to make things better. And anyway, at a certain point, it just I'll leave that for another chapter because there's some there was an in-house situation that kind of ruined it for me, that undermined me. And let's just say all the guys with zippers went along with it. And yeah, you can only imagine how she got her way. And literally, and I'm not. This isn't far. This is literal.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, or what's not funny about it, when I called the mothership in Ohio to talk to the HR lady about it, it was really reverse discrimination.
Yeah.
And when I was explaining to her verbatim what was going on, I said, if you want me to put tape recorders and cameras under everybody's desk, I'll do that.
Yeah.
But I can name names of what's going on here. And she just didn't want to hear it and this and that. And basically I'm like, look, I know what you're afraid of. This is a house of cards, so to speak, that I can, with some witnesses I got and this and that, this wouldn't be good for you people.
Yeah.
But it was the opposite of what wasn't even on the playing field yet, where you started to hear male harassment of women in the workplace.
Yeah.
I was a dude saying this.
Yeah.
So I don't know why all HR ladies' names are named Mary, but the KTM lady and the Harley lady, both their names were Mary. And she just didn't want to hear it. I didn't feel like getting a lawyer, but I
Yeah.
could have. That's how blatant this was. I had proof, I had dates, I had recordings. I mean, it was ridiculous. So, yeah. So as they say, pulled a tear off, and then then one day kicked around again, and then the 2-2 thing came up.
Mm.
As magical as some of the places were, because winning is always magical, like you were asking my favorite place. 2-2 was unique. 2-2 was very reminiscent of Pro Circuit in a sense, even though Chad didn't have a retail business like Mitch does to support him. Chad was basically the business owner,
Yeah.
the rider, the racer. And, whoever did it before Chad, when Emig started that team, they never had the success that Chad did.
Yeah, that's right.
You
Yeah,
know,
he's the first
I think
one.
when Emig, I mean, and I got to say, in a non-conceited way, we did a lot of innovative things. Our pit area had a presence at the time nobody really had. And then I was good friends with Kenny Watson, and he borrowed some of our things, as they say, and just borrowed the look or even the outright fabricator of some of our things.
Yeah.
For their thing and their activation, which is kind of a cancer word to me.
Yeah.
That became a prominent thing, activation with these semis. We only had one semi, but you gotta keep the sponsors happy. And so the activation thing, when you go to some of these races that have the race semi, then they'd have the hospitality, and then they're showing, tires and wheels or lubes and fuels and refrigerators and who the hell else knows. There's only so much you can do. But the 2-2 Motorsports thing was really special. I had a special group of guys. A lot of them were championship guys in their own right, and it was just really a cool deal. It was. I don't know too many people that can say that. Where the owner of the team is the racer of the team, and I got to tell you, even people can say a lot of shit about Chad Reed because people always ask me these crazy questions, and I'm like, look, I'm never going to throw the guy under the bus. There's always some truth to some stories, but I'm not here to do that. When Chad got hurt that year, when we should have won those 2 titles, when Chad got hurt that year, he paid us the whole year. We were fully employed the whole year. We were testing and developing. Lars was a good rider at the time, a good speed, and he did some development for us. He took care of us. A lot of other big teams wouldn't have done that.
No, that's for sure.
Big private teams, Brad.
Yeah.
Factory team is different, but a big private team, I mean, the Star Racing of old in those years, they would have let most of the guys go. And that kind of woke up, because really, and that was kind of around the time we started to figure we were going to leave Honda. Honda promised us in Chad's contract, Honda promised us a second rider.
Yeah.
With the budget and all that. And then that was kind of interesting. One day I get this phone call after all our success. The American Honda guys were gone. I don't know where the hell they were. They were in Japan or wherever they were. I don't remember at the time. They were just gone. And I'm sitting at my desk at Honda, just doing my normal paperwork stuff for the team. And all the guys were there. I get a call from the boss, and Chad says, he goes, Davo, where are you at? What are you doing? And I tell him, he goes, are the guys around? And I said, yeah, everybody's here. blah, blah, blah. And he's like, the phone kind of gets quiet. And all of a sudden he goes, how fast or quick do you think you could get out of Honda? And I said, what? Pardon me? And he goes, how quick could you mobilize all the guys and get out of Honda like we were never there? And I'm like, of course I said, are you fucking serious? And he goes, you know what's been going on, and I'll explain more later, but you just got to promise me you'll get this done. And I said, wow, I tell you what, I'll get it done right down to the sign on the wall that I put up. And he goes, let me know when it's done. And I gathered all the guys, and I said, hey, I just got off the phone with Chad. We got the semi here. We got the box van here. I said, we need to get out of here like the place is on fire. And we need to get all our shit like we were never here, right down to sweeping the floor. And of course, they're all like, why, what? But I can't say anything because I don't know anything. I'm just following orders, and I need to execute these orders. And I said, you guys, if we really bust our ass, I don't remember what the time was, Steve, but I said, we can be out of here by X time.
Yeah.
and then I told the truck driver we would go. I'm like, fuck. Then everything was on me.
Mm.
You got to understand, everything was on me.
Yeah.
In other words, where are we going to go? The box van, which you even had in Australia. I mean, you could park that at your freaking house if it was full.
Yeah. Where are you going to park it? Well,
we're going to park the semi.
Walmart car park.
It's all logoed up and stuff. And so we did that. I was panicking. I called Chad. I'm like, dude, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And he's like, figure it out, Davo. You always do. Click, And I'm like, oh man. And that was, I guess, some of my good qualities bite me in the ass because I am the guy that.
Yeah.
I am that guy. So I'm thinking, and then I remember, okay, Mitch has the third building. It's kind of an overflow for him, blah, 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 blah. I call Mitch, who in those days was taking my calls all the time, and I get him on the phone, and I just said, look, this is what's going down. This is per Chad. And, out of respect for me or Chad or whatever, would we be able to park the semi and the box van in your third building? Just initially for a few days till we figure out what the fuck we're doing. And he goes, then the phone got quiet on his end. And he goes, okay, I think I can do that. When do you think you would be here? And I said, we'll be there before your closing today. Because then we had to go all across town.
Mm.
So basically that's what we did. And that was pretty incredible. And then, Chad explained why, which we all kind of knew why. Honda just they kind of screwed them and didn't live up to their end of the agreement.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the years we were successful at Honda and the Honda guys were on the couch healing, we kept the lights on at Honda.
That's
as well
right.
as
He
Pro
was the
Circuit.
guy, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
It was, but Honda's upper management at the time, there's really no riders like Chad. In other words, he'll ask for heat in the back of the bus.
Yeah.
Or he'll make his own. In other words, when we first started at Honda, I got called in, didn't even know what I was called in for. the management guys are sitting in there, and I'm like, and they're like, close the door. And it's Kehoe and the other guys. What, did I do something wrong, or we do something wrong? When Chad started with his graphics, well, when Chad started with the internet stuff in general, and then and putting the at CR22 on the graphics and all that, they hated that.
Yeah.
They couldn't understand it. And I said, it was a breath of fresh air for me. I said, Chad's just taken a play out of the ball and bat sports. All these guys, Honda, you guys get the most looks in the pits for two reasons. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Just from the mystique and the storiness of the bikes stemming from the Marty Smith era to now.
Yeah.
The red, all the success. But you also get looks because you're the most stodgy, kind of regimented, unfriendly race team in the pits.
Yeah.
You guys have that reputation, not me. And right away they started browbeating me about Chad with his social media and this and that. I go, look, he's not putting ignition curves and transmission ratios on the internet, but he's shedding light on what's going on here from a positive light of what's going on within his team, and showing the bike in ways that you've never even embraced yourselves, maybe outside of a win ad. And even a win ad is just one-dimensionally cold. He's the first guy in this sport to let people in. And I said, that's going to pay huge dividends. And one of the guys I remember said to me, I don't remember who, oh, what are you, some sales and marketing genius now? No, not at all. But I know the way Chad is wired, and I know the way he thinks, and he sees these things. When we did the red pants, I mean, that went down to our pit setup and all that stuff. Chad was a very forward thinker. He loves MotoGP, all that stuff. And he brought all that F1 MotoGP stuff into the race team.
Yeah.
He gave me free reign to do whatever I want. And I'd always made him aware of everything, no surprises, but he liked everything because I knew what he was after. But then right down to the clothing, him and Ellie together, they really came up with stuff beyond just a pit shirt and black pants.
Yeah.
It really turned heads, and people embraced it. I mean, come on, even when we went to France that year and he won a moto, I mean, it's funny. We went out to Mexican food, me and the guys, after we got our pit shirts for Europe, the green and the yellow and the jackets and shit. But we were all wearing our pit shirts still. We went out and had a beer and some tacos at the local place. And you'd kind of get heckled from local people, from the Australian colors.
Yeah.
Because we're not, but when I went to France that year, sure, I wanted Chad to win. I didn't think of it as Australia. I thought of it as Chad Reed.
That was your guy. Yeah.
And Brett Metcalf. I just wanted our team to win. But I still wanted USA to do well.
Yeah.
I mean, that was when Chad was leading that moto in France. That was an unbelievable moment for the fucking team.
Yeah.
And he did some of those moments, like his crash at Millville.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand, when I was in France with him, I was miserable with my hip.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to the team, the only people that knew about it were a couple of mechanics. I would get off the airplane, walk to the rent-a-car, my leg would be numb or my foot would be numb. I was up all night. I'd be living on Advils. I wore it pretty well for about 2.5 years on the team because I had to. The plane flights, those long flights to Europe were a nightmare. There was possibly an opportunity of going to Australia. And as much as I wanted to go, I didn't want to go because I couldn't have gone on that plane flight like that. So I was actually kind of happy when I didn't get to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got food poisoning at a race. I think it was Minnesota, an outdoor. I got food poisoning. We all went out for Mexican food, and I got food poisoning. I was dying in my hotel room. I didn't make the race. I felt so guilty. I was so effed up. My wife had to call the hotel desk and plead with the girls at the desk to run out and get me some medicines. And then I was able to fly home, but I felt terrible. I told Ellie I wasn't faking. I didn't have too much to drink the night before. I literally got food poisoning. I was inside out. But now the Reed thing, there were some special moments like France and where that were just monster freaking moments. You know what I mean? That you were walking
that first win. Like
unbelievable. First win.
Like San Diego 11. Yeah.
Yeah. The first win was unbelievable, emotional.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Look, I remember Dodger Stadium. I'm walking to the semi. It was the first time we were ever there. I didn't even remember where we parked the truck. I'm walking up from practice. Guy B comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, Davo, can I walk with you?" I'm like, "Sure." I got to get my bearings and find my way home. And he's like, "So Chad was, what was he, 6th or 8th in practice? What do you think of that?" He's got his tape recorder there, or whatever the hell it was. And I was kind of ignoring him. And he goes, "What do you think of that?" And I said, "Look, the guy doesn't win practice."
That's right.
And if there's one thing you don't have to do with this guy is tell him how to ride. We just help, sure, we may look at films and show him lines and this and that, or he'll ask, but I mean, this guy's a seasoned guy. And then he ends up winning the freaking race. You know what I mean? He ends up winning the race. Whereas when I was with Metcalf, Mitch used to get pissed because Mitch always wanted his guys to be on the board in practice. And Metcalf a lot of times never was,
Yeah.
And it's just different. It's just different ways of doing it, Some guys go out and win practice, and sure, they'll still be a player in the race, but a lot of times they're not, and you've seen that. I mean, so I think no, the whole Reed thing's unique, and that now he seems to be marching forward with his kid.
Yeah.
Outside of Kaya, the daughter that was recently hurt, I kind of feel for her, but Tate, just in the videos I see of him, his form and his style, if he can get his results to match how good that looks.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they just went to a regional the other day, I think around Father's Day. Before you called this morning, I was looking at some of the pictures.
Yeah.
And I still write Ellie or Chad. I comment on things. And once in a blue moon, we talk, or he needs a favor. But at the end of the day, I've written her a couple times and I said just what I said to her. I'm like, man, he looks so good on the bike. He can almost be a model just for how you should look.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it was his big wheel 85, he was jumping. I mean, he's watched his dad's footage and listened to his words well, because even now that he's on a 250F, and let's face it, he's still a young kid, so he needs to grow into himself.
Yeah.
But on that bike, in that gear, I'm just like, I show my wife, I go, my son's a clothing designer, like I told you, for Fast House. He's like, this kid really looks, I don't want to say jet-ish, but he's really pretty to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot of it. I remember when I was in my skiing days, I had an instructor one time, and he'd be telling us, if your legs are burning in a section and you're carrying a lot of speed, that could be certainly due to the hill you're on, or it could be due to the form you're not showing.
Yeah.
And I always thought about that, because obviously a lot of the ski racers that we've all watched on TV, Olympics or whatever, they do a lot of training like every other sport. And so they're geared for that burning. But if you're just a weekend warrior, like with arm pump on a dirt bike, if your form or setup is wrong, that's a lot of what that is sometimes.
Yeah.
Outside of just saddle time in general. So, yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see as time goes on. I felt terrible when Kaya got hurt, especially now they got that new Alpine Star system. They didn't have it developed yet for kids. That might have helped her.
It's a good thing, that, isn't it?
God, it's phenomenal. I mean,
it's great. I reckon.
I would think,
great.
Obviously, Alpine Star developed it, has it. They're starting to produce them. I don't know if they're for sale yet. But like all the other companies have helmets. I'm sure Alpine Star has patents up the wazoo for that. At some point, you'd think they'd license it to Fox and all these other people.
Yeah.
Because I think the first concern is kind of safety.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And as long as all the helmet manufacturers may be similar in appearance and they all have their features, and I don't know who's licensing what from who, if they're even doing that. I think the 6D stuff is only unique to them. But from being around, it's like certain things like this chest protector, I would think it'd be, I think Alpine Stars is a pretty well-off company in their own right. That again, they could license that to select people.
Yeah.
Because I think safety first and lowering attrition, even in your own neighborhood outside of the professional starting line, is a good thing. Yeah. As far as I know, in MotoGP, where that kind of came from.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I believe now I've seen it. I think downhill skiers have it too.
Yep.
In other words, for all I know, maybe Alpine Star licensed it from somebody else. Whoever the inventor is, I think it'd be for the betterment of the sport, even for skateboarding. If I got to tell you, like we talked in the beginning, and you were asking my health. I feel for these kids. Now that I'm much older, you heal slower. I'm anxious to get back on my mountain bikes, and I ride a road bicycle, and my dirt bike.
Yep.
I don't want to get hurt. Like I said, my forethought is always to drive home.
That's right. Yeah.
Even this time of year in the SoCal, I get kind of paranoid when it's in the upper 80s to 90s to 100s. It's rattlesnake season here. I know in Australia you got more things there that'll kill you than we do here, but it's just something I'm always aware of. I know because a lot of times I ride solo, and I know there could be a mountain lion up there.
Yeah.
So I'm always conscious of trying to ride certain times of the day. But yeah, like, I think when you interview people, you're always going to have highs and lows and hits and misses. And, you've been around, Steve, obviously doing these things and just being around the sport. I've always said, it's like more people talk smack about what they don't know than what they know.
Yeah, that's right.
I got to tell you, when I was looking for work, nobody was opening doors for me.
Yeah.
And outside of my long career, as soon as I put on the shirt from 2-2, all of a sudden I was getting beers at the hotels I didn't pay for. in the manager's tower, guys that were talking to me that wouldn't call me back before. And I hate all that shit.
Oh, yes,
because
yeah.
I hate all that
preaching
shit
to the
because
corner there, Dave. That's almost
well, no,
my biggest
they're
thing
all
in life is that point you're making there. Yeah,
well, yeah. None of the people are fucking real. I will say one thing about me.
Yeah.
People can say what they want to say about me if they've experienced me,
yeah,
but I'm always the same, and I'm real.
yeah,
And if you and me, Steve, are on a hike, if you're out of water, I'm worried about you before I take my next drink. I
Yeah.
got everybody raises before I got one. In other words, I've always been that way. On the way
Yeah.
back from the test track, hey, you guys hungry? Before I just thought of it. You know what I mean? I've always been conscious of that. I've always been accommodating. I mean, yeah. But hey, I could be an asshole too. I mean, it goes with the job. I think it's a license that goes with the job. So when I look back at Keith McCarty, he brought a lot to the fold, like my initial manager, Kenny Clark, brought to the fold. And I'm sure Keith at the time didn't like being on the other end of some of Kenny Clark's things as I was.
Yeah.
But, working for Bob Hanna, he got away with a lot more than maybe I did. But, back then we were a dominant force as much as Honda was in those days. And it was really cool to be part of that. So again, as magical as that was, the 2-2 stuff remains. And what's cool now, I tell my wife and my kid all the time now, maybe you've seen some of my posts. A lot of times I get pictures from people, for example, in the Mike Bell era, that were little kids going to the races with their dads, right? Now they're in their 40s or 50s, and they're posting pictures on Facebook from when they went. And so some of these guys, I get these pictures, and in the caption, I'll write, "Wow, that's a cool picture. I've never seen that before." Some old Bell pictures, and even there's some Reed stuff. I get people sending me messages. What an idiot Chad and Ellie are for letting Tate or Kaya race, and that Tate's not doing it the right way. And I said, no, some of the guys I've written back, some of them I don't. A couple of guys I wrote back and said, we all learned in a field. We all learned up in the hills. We all learned it on illegal tracks. This guy is like Tiger Woods taking his kid out to show him the fundamentals of golf. He doesn't need anybody or anything else. He's riding the best tracks on the best bikes in the best or worst conditions with probably one of the best coaches around if he chooses to listen to him. So I said, that's, you can't, I mean, you know what it's like. Probably even in Australia, there's more old riders as coaches now than there ever used to be. It seems that's the profession now. If you're not a podcaster, you're a coach. There's a million of them.
Yeah.
But I tell all these guys, I mean, all that's good if you can afford it. All of that will get you from point A to point B quicker and hopefully be safer, But again, you go to Barnes and Noble bookstore, there's 10 books on lifting weights and there's 20 books on a golf swing. One of the things I hated about Little League when I was a kid is that, the coach comes up to you, the coach didn't come up and tell me how to wipe my ass, but he came up to me and told me how to hold the bat. When I was learning, my dad was an avid golfer, and my mom, when they took me to the golf course as a kid, golf is fashionable now. In my day, I hated it. You know why? Because it was 50, 60 years ago. All the golfers looked like car salesmen, green pants and red socks. And we go to the driving range. First of all, I was left-handed, and every buddy of my dad's came up to me and goes, "Hey, Bob, I'll give your kid a few pointers." I must have had 10 guys on any given day showing me how to hold the club with the right grip and the right this and the right that. And I kind of get that, Steve. I don't want to sound like some punk at a young age. I know better. But, when me and my two brothers would snap towels at each other, I would snap it at him this way, and he would snap it at me his way. You follow what I mean? There was
Yeah.
no right or wrong way to snap the towel. The
Yeah.
goal was just to snap the fucking towel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I see what
I've
you're
always
saying.
kind of been, I don't
Yeah.
want to say I've always been a rebel,
Yeah.
but you know, if you and I go to dinner at some point, if I ever meet you face to face, you may drink your beer in a bottle, you may pour it in a glass, you may hold your spoon with the right hand and the left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no real right or wrong way. Or you know, when I was dating my wife, her late father would tell me no elbows on the table, and I'm like, why not?
Yeah. Who said?
You know,
Whose rule is that? Yeah.
that was his rule, but it wasn't my
Yeah.
rule.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I think I don't know if we stayed on track, off track, or if this is going to be you're going to file this in the round file when I hang up. But
no, man, no. It's been really good. Towards at the end of the show, I like to just throw in just some a couple of different things, couple of fun things. I always like to ask people about what sort of music they're into, and you've mentioned Van Halen a few times, so I reckon that.
Well, I will tell you, in the box van days, in my sleeper,
yeah,
I had two, and I'm talking back 8 tracks and then cassettes.
yeah.
I mean, the box van days was mainly cassettes.
Mm.
I had 2 Kenwood home speakers bolted up into the right and left side of my ceiling, and those speakers were as big as an ice chest.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
You know, and Mark Barnett back in the day at the hotel, though we were on different teams, I'd be working in the back of the van on an engine or something. He'd be in the front of my truck a few times, just listening to the music.
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, I've always been a heavy metal guy. You know, everything from Jethro Tull to I like all kinds of music. I tell people, if it makes my foot move,
yeah,
then it's a good thing.
It's just the feeling.
You know, my wife and I, when we got married,
yeah.
when my wife and I got married, we walked down the aisle to the instrumental from Dreams.
Yeah.
You know, it just every time I hear Dreams to this day, I've been married to her 38 years. Every time I hear Dreams in my van, I can't turn it loud enough because the hairs on my arm stand up. You know, it's just.
Yeah. Is that your favorite Halen song?
Excuse me?
Is that your favorite Van Halen song, Dreams?
I couldn't even tell you a favorite Van Halen song.
Yeah. Panama for me.
There's so many Van Halen songs. Put it this way. Back in the day, if my schedule permitted, if they were playing the Forum 5 nights, me and my buddies went 5 nights.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and they were local. You know, no, I've always been that way to this day. Even my kids were reared on, Van Halen, Deep Purple, whatever. But even, hey, I love the Beach Boys too.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, I was bummed to hear he passed away, but we all will someday. But yeah, no, I think, hey, want to hear one Chad Reed thing?
Yeah.
It's a trip. When I first started with him, I asked Joel, his right-hand man, I go, does Chad not listen to music? You know, apparently he doesn't listen to music.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm just saying, in the race shop and in the semi, we would always have it going, but he wouldn't have it going. You know, and when you see a lot of the riders bopping around with headphones on and all that stuff that is commonplace here and in Europe and everywhere, I show me a picture of him with some beats on or something.
Yeah. He's not into it. Yeah. Never knew that.
Yeah, it's interesting. But still that look of his,
yeah,
I'd call the white shark look, because it's like that gunfighter stare, you know. And it's funny to me that Tate kind of has that too.
Yeah.
I pointed that out to Ellie some time ago. And that's kind of a magical thing for me because I of all the people that's
Yeah.
been around him, I feel like I'm the one that's pointed it out.
Mm.
And a lot of people that digest it, like you, that may know him, they think about that for a while and they go, you know, I can kind of see that. You know, yeah, it's just, yeah, he's gnarly. Like I said, I've been around some greats, as you know.
Yeah. So
Hannah
many.
Glover,
Yeah.
Bell,
Mm.
Lachine, Grant Langston, Ryan Hughes, you name it. Ivan Tedesco, Pierre Carsmakers, Heike Mikkola. But Chad Reed, man, he's unique because he's reinvented himself a few times, which is very similar to my own story. And because again, the business we're in is kind of Hollywood. 1 minute you're up and they love you, and the next minute you're down and they're almost kicking you. It's just till something else goes your way, you know. And you've probably seen that maybe in some of your other interviews. It's up, down, and for whatever reason, but
That's
life,
right.
I guess. But
In
I
your
enjoy.
busiest, sorry, in your busiest times, like did you have how did you relax when you needed to relax? Was that music? Was that like, was that your thing?
I'm never without music.
Yeah.
I'm never without music. That's number one. Number two, music. When I worked for Chad, music was a big deal with me for the introduction to Supercross. That was one of my favorite moments of the night
Okay.
outside of winning the damn race because I'm the one that fed all the music to the Feld people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I used the AC/DC thing that he
Yeah.
wrote into most of the time. Because when I was working for him and I would hear that song, man, it was just a special feeling, whether I was in an airport or and then I had what I call angry rock, like Linkin Park.
Yeah.
Linkin
Yeah.
Park helped me get through a lot of my Yamaha days
Yeah.
because the late Chester Bennington, if
Mm.
you listen to a lot of his angry vocals, that was me. Some of their songs speak to me like I was yelling at Keith.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, literally, some of
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
and so angry rock like that was real powerful for me. I had a girlfriend when I was with Yamaha that I was on again off with, that one I told you about earlier with that rider, and then who knows what would have happened. But the one night we were supposed to go out with her and her girlfriend, I blew it off because I had to work. I had shit to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And she got in a car crash, died. That was right towards the end of '83. And then Van Halen's album 1984, I was kind of a recluse for a long time.
Yeah.
And that album helped me get through a lot of her demise. Literally. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's to this day, it's very special to me. Because it was an uplifting type of an album. Because that 1984, that was her demise. That was my Yamaha demise. And so I was in a weird place.
Oh, bet.
And then this album came out. Yeah, it wasn't the kind of thing where I blamed myself for her death, but I should have been there, you know, but work always came first for me. That I'm happily married to this day, but I think about that situation all the time. Probably never get over it, but and then the guy that was driving the car. Excuse
you
me.
don't get over things like that. Yeah, it gets easier, but you don't get over it. Yeah.
Well, I always wonder because in some of the circles I'm in, the guy that was driving that car has been around, and I always wonder, what would I do? Would I walk up and just knock him on his ass? Because I'm not a big guy. I'm not a big MMA fighter. But what would really happen? If you remember years ago, the 100% guy, Drew Lean, took his own life. And when we went to the service at the church, a couple pews ahead of me, my one mutual buddy with that guy, Jim Hawley,
Yeah.
the racer Jim Hawley, made me aware that that was him. And I was weird that whole day. This was 30 freaking years, 40 years ago. But whatever it was. But anyway, over that. What else you got for me?
I always like mechanics. I always like to ask, what's your top mechanical tip? Just for like a novice mechanic, like a dad who's his son is just mechanic for his son, amateur dad.
I'll tell you,
best tip.
It's have open eyes and open ears. Don't be stubborn. Stubborn's easy. And you got to measure things 3 times, which is another word to say be freaking thorough.
Yeah.
Because somebody could get hurt on what you're doing if you're not paying attention. You know what I mean? It's like, I once interviewed a mechanic and he walks into me and he came recommended to me, but he walked in and his shoe was untied. And I totally put him on the spot. I said, I should tell you to leave right now. He said, what do you mean? What did I do? Am I doing something wrong? I go, your shoe's untied. I said, I'm not a banker. I'm a race team guy. So I'm telling you, I just met you. We haven't even shook hands yet. And you walked in with your lace untied. You could have a good resume, but your shoe's untied. What does that make me think of you? In other words, were you not aware your shoe's untied? So it's an old saying of mine. If people have been around me, they always know I say I double knot my shoes. Yeah. Because I do.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect, but the chances of a double knotted shoe, because everybody wears skate shoes or an athletic shoe in the scene, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always double knot my shoes, and I've seen the best guys. I'd rather have my zipper down than my shoe untied.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of my philosophy. Just don't be stubborn, have an open mind, listen. Everybody's as good as they are from their experience, but also from somebody that came before them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
A painter just doesn't become a painter. A mechanic doesn't just become a mechanic. So at some point, somebody opened the door for that guy or girl.
All right, we'll wrap it up. There's 2 things I do to wrap up the show. The first one is I always ask any of the US guests to give me your best Aussie accent. So you've been around lots of Aussies, so give me your best Aussie accent.
Actually, I'm kind of suffering from a sore throat I got the other day. And I do a lot of imitations. Just the oi, oi, oi,
Yeah.
I used to, actually, when I was working for Metcalf, or they were around, there was a period I had good times with the Metcalfs and dark times with the Metcalfs. And with Frenchie, there's a guy in Australia, a well-known engine builder. Do you know that guy, Cisco?
Yes. I don't know him personally, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Anyway, we had the unfortunate thing to get involved with him. I respect the guy. He was kind of innocent of it. The Metcalfs did it all. Keith McCarty allowed it to happen. Let's just say we had a period when they put Brett on that 125 in a sea of 4 strokes.
Yeah.
That Brett and Steve Metcalf were forcing their hand with the Cisco engines, and Keith let it happen, which I disagree with. But at the end of the day, I used to mimic that guy all the time because I didn't like him.
Yeah.
I didn't want him. I didn't like him. It was unnecessary. It didn't make any difference to his results. And So there was a period of hate, love, hate with the Metcalfs. But you know, everybody gets beyond it. Everybody matures, including myself. But that was a very trying time. But it was another one of Yamaha's things. When they put Mehdi on the 125,
Yeah.
I told Keith, "You're out of your mind."
Yeah,
But it was all
weird.
sales. It was all sales driven.
Yeah.
But I said, "There's only one guy that could do this." But anyway, what's the next question?
Oh, it's
Because
not
I
a
gotta
question.
go.
It's just how I close out the show. My outro music is me. I sing a little bit of Kenny Rogers to end the show, and I'm not a singer. It's just for fun. And I always say, if you know the words to The Gambler, you're more than welcome to join in. So
Now, Kurt Evans told me about that.
he warned you, did he? You're not supposed to
Yeah,
warn
and
you.
I'm not much of a country guy.
Yeah,
I like some stuff, but
righto. Let's
yeah.
get into it. So I handed him my bottle, and he drank down my last swallow. Then he bummed a cigarette and asked me for a light, and the night got deathly quiet, and his face lost all expression. Said, if you're gonna play the game, boy, you gotta learn to play it right. You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. Davo, thank you very
Yes,
much for
sir.
your time today. It's been a pleasure.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it.
You
Maybe
enjoy the rest
someday
of your
we'll
day.
meet. Maybe someday we'll meet face to face.
I'm sure we will. Thanks, man. Enjoy the
All right,
rest
I
of your
appreciate
day.
it. You
Thank you,
too.
man.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.